Also, we don't have a.
Who do we need that we can tag?
David Collum, Andres Mello.
I think this is on there somewhere.
Okay, we've got a quorum.
Should we all be able to see everything?
I don't think so. She said six.
I think that's.
I think it's also about the. Hi, David. If you'd unmute yourself and test your audio real quick.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Oh, we saw you for a second and then we lost you, but we can hear you. Share your webcam again real quick.
You can't hear me? I see my, or you can't see me, I see myself on the
I see you. I can see you.
Oh, why can't I see?
Are we ready?
Already disappeared from my screen.
Are we ready to start?
Let's see. It's 5:31. Oh yeah, it's 5:31. We have a quorum.
The agenda on there?
Ready to start?
Yes.
Okay, I'm starting the broadcast.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Michelle, do you speak first or shall I? Sorry, it's brand new to me.
Oh no, you can go ahead.
Okay, this is Kathleen Rodriguez and I'm Chair of the Circulation and Transportation Committee, and we're starting the meeting here on June 25th. So first of all, we just need to take the roll call.
Committee
And,
member Hodges. Absent. Committee member Collum.
I'm here.
Hanford.
Here.
Horn.
Here.
Melavos.
Here.
Blackerby.
Here.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Present.
Thank you.
Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, Madam Chair, we have no changes to the agenda.
Thank you very much. We have a space here for public comment if there's anything that's anyone has signed up for, separate from specific topics. Anyone? No?
So Michelle, if you would just see if there's anyone raising their hand if anyone would like to do public comment, they would please raise your hand. You're attending the meeting, and then Michelle will come on and give you permission to speak and tell you when to speak.
Madam Chair, there is nobody raising their hand for general public comments, so back to you.
Terrific. All right. Okay, then I think we're ready for approval of the minutes from February 27th, since we were unable to meet in April.
Okay, I'll take roll call one more time for your votes. Committee member Blackerby.
Aye.
Hodges, absent. Collum.
Aye.
Sanford,
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
Malavos,
Aye.
and Chair Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's time for us to move on to our reports. Rob, the order on the agenda that I have is Vision Zero first. Would, if you'd like to change that, any order, now's the time.
No, Madam Chair, I'm just waiting for the slides to advance to the first item, and then we'll get underway. Good evening, Madam Chair and Transportation Circulation Committee members. It's great to have you here. We have missed you all. Last time we were going to be on a meeting, the COVID crisis hit, and unfortunately for the United States and for our city, that has been a challenge, and we actually missed a meeting. So we're going to be catching up. We're going to be catching up with two items that we've already shared. The first two items we've already shared with City Council. Both of these we are intending to show to you, so it's exciting to do. Both of them are Vision Zero oriented. So let me get into the first one and talk about Vision Zero communication and our public outreach. Next slide. So I want to start a little bit to go back into, well, first of all, what we're looking for right now in this presentation is just to show you our communication, public outreach, and what we've done, show you the website, and show you the video that was produced for the website. I think you'll like it very much. So next slide. I want to go over Vision Zero a little bit more for those of you who are new, and then there might be someone in the city who's watching for the first time and learning about Vision Zero. So what is Vision Zero? Well, it was adopted by the City Council in 2018, and what it represents is it's a change of the mindset of how we look at traffic collisions and safety in the city. We're here to implement Vision Zero projects that are oriented toward that safety, the new lens that we're looking through. And we're working on developing a message and branding for Vision Zero. So while the council has adopted a policy, what this item is really about is how do we brand Vision Zero? And it's interesting, many communities have done it in different ways. You're looking at the logo that was chosen, that's on the screen now. But let me give you a little bit of background on that too. Next slide. Vision Zero originated in Sweden. It's the idea that traffic-related deaths and serious injuries are avoidable, and they're also unacceptable. And it's really interesting, and I've said this before, but Derek Bailey, who's the traffic engineer here at the city of Santa Barbara, we were all taught in school that there's a certain number of collisions that are acceptable. Per million miles traveled on the public right-of-way, there's a certain number of collisions that is normal. And that's just the way we have been taught. 40,000 Americans a year die in automobile-related collisions, and then many, many more are maimed or go to the hospital with severe injuries. The shift in thinking is that we take responsibility for those collisions and those deaths, and work backwards to get to a much safer transportation system. And Sweden has been very successful since they implemented it. And now more American cities have implemented where we've been at that list. Next slide. Really interesting when you look at the difference between the airline industry and the auto industry. Very, very different approaches. The airline industry has always had Vision Zero. And that's mainly because when a plane goes down, everyone's I mean, first of all, there's a lot of carnage. You could be as many, somewhere between 100 and 300 deaths, depending upon the airline, and they all happen at once. And if a number of planes go down, then the airline industry actually suffers because people don't want to take it and they actually feel like it's less safe. The airline industry has always been consistently safer than the auto industry. In other words, you're much more likely to die in a vehicle or at the mercy of a vehicle than you would ever be in an airplane. But we've all been in that situation where we're on the runway or we're taxiing to the runway and the pilot comes on and says, I'm sorry, we're turning back because we think something might be wrong. And then they check out the plane and 9 times out of 10, they get back on the runway and take off and everything's fine. But because they're so safety oriented, more and more the airline industry has seen less deaths. And in 2017 was the first year in aviation history there were no passenger deaths that year. In the auto industry, it's completely different. And death happens much differently in the auto industry. Usually you're not hearing about a lot of deaths at once. In fact, kind of crazy, but when we hear about a collision on the roadway, usually it's an announcement for congestion. And now we're thinking, are we going to be delayed because of the collision? We're not thinking about, oh, I wonder if someone died and they went to the hospital and their lives are disruptive. Could that happen to me? We're not thinking that way. And so deaths by collision in the auto industry happen over time and they're less noticeable and in our face. So we don't think that much about it. And we feel artificially safe in vehicles or being on the road. Next slide. So we want to adopt that Vision Zero, the same kind of mentality we have for the airline industry, for the automobile industry, and for Santa Barbara. Well, how does Santa Barbarans get to work? Because it makes a big difference in how vulnerable you are in traffic safety. So as you might not be surprised, most of us get to work using the vehicle, 74%. And then you see walking and bicycling at 13%. Telecommute, I think post-COVID, we're going to see an uptick in telecommuting. And that's going to probably replace or supplant vehicle commuting. Next slide. When you look at, okay, let's go to the next slide. So 13% are those bikes and ped users. So when you look at collisions by mode, which is on the left, 2008 to 2017, you see actually a very similar chart where the majority is vehicle and then less on the pedestrians and bicyclists. But then when you look at serious or fatal injuries, which is on the right, the pedestrians and the bicyclists share a much higher percentage, and that's because they're more vulnerable. They're more vulnerable to death and injury. Serious injury is when you actually get transported to the hospital and then you get admitted. So pedestrians and bicycles comprise 16% of total collisions, yet account for 62% of serious injuries or fatalities. So we have to pay closely attention to them. Next slide. Speed is a factor. And when you get hit by a car that's going 20 miles an hour, it's a 90% chance you're going to live. But if you get hit by a car that's going 40 miles an hour, it's a 90% chance that you're going to die. So speed does come into our Vision Zero strategy. Next slide. We were, if you'll remember, in the TCC, the Transportation Circulation Committee was instrumental in implementing this strategy. So I hope most of you are familiar with, but this is really important. The 7 core principles of this strategy is that life is the most important. So that's the thing we should be going for. Whether you think about at home, the chances of getting your life in jeopardy through crime, but then also in an automobile, whether you get injured or die in a crime or in the automobile, there's no different. The outcome is still the same. So we're talking about this first principle is that life is really the most important thing. Every person matters. People make mistakes. This is the hardest part for most people to understand is how do we account for people's mistakes on the roadway? And actually we can do that. We focus on dangerous locations and behaviors first. So where we know someone is actually going to die or get seriously injured, that's where we should pay most attention and fix the roadway first. Drivers have a critical responsibility. And part of the outreach effort that we're talking about today is to help Santa Barbarans understand that they have a critical responsibility. And then, as you just heard, peds and cyclists are the most vulnerable users. And then the government, we share responsibility for safer streets. So there are engineering things that we can do when we see patterns that we can avoid those patterns. Next slide. The 4 elements are of implementation for our Vision Zero strategy are evaluation, engineering, enforcement, and education. Next slide. And so the first one is the one we're talking about tonight. It's that evaluation, and we haven't talked about this with the committee in a long time. And this is our first inroad. It's reviewing data collision and determining where the collision trends are. You're really familiar with the heat map that we've put out that shows the 10 years of collisions and where they're most likely to reoccur. Next slide. And then the committee is most familiar with our engineering practices that we've brought to the committee we often will ask the committee to find that the project we're proposing is consistent with the Vision Zero strategy. This is focused elimination of collision patterns and primarily to reduce the effects of human error. And the slide you're looking at, the picture on the right is that Las Positas, Macaw is the street that's going to be on the left. And we redid the striping there so that we provide that left turn lane. And since we've done this striping, we've eliminated the rear ends and the T-bones at that intersection. We've eliminated them. We haven't seen one since we did this. So this is real. We really are saving lives and injuries by doing these little tweaks on the road and analyzing the patterns where we were seeing this collision reoccur every single year. So we knew it was going to happen again based on the pattern. We fixed it. That's the engineering approach. Next slide. Enforcement is a big deal. If you see a cop and a police officers, you're most likely going to slow down and obey those laws. Be more careful if you see police out there pulling you over. So right now we do mainly targeted enforcement with PD through Office of Traffic and Safety enforcement grants where there's we use overtime, and then we get a number of officers on the street at one time focusing on traffic safety in certain areas of our city. Next slide. And then finally, the one we're here to talk about tonight is the education piece. How do we change the way people think about traffic safety? The example I love to use the most is, most of you will remember, some of us who are older, the Recycle campaign. And the Recycle campaign, and I remember the commercial of the river in the city full of trash, and then they panned up to an American Indian who was crying. And that was the opening scene to a number of years of the recycling and Don't Litter campaign. And guess what? Now when you have a can in your hand, an aluminum can, you look around for the blue bin, and if you can't find a blue bin, somehow it's just not okay to throw it away because we've convinced you that the government or the society's convinced you that it's important to recycle. It's important not to litter. Next slide. So how are we going to do that? So we do that through our Vision Zero communications. And so what we've done is we've hired a consultant, and along with that branding, we've started to get a feel for a website and an opening video. We're gonna show you that video. But the website, what we're trying to do with the website is just the first step. Dip our foot in the pool and just get into communication by having a presence and having the city citizens recognize what Vision Zero is. The website is the first step, and it actually asks you to take the pledge, for you to agree that you will abide by safety and traffic laws, and then you're in with Vision Zero. So we worked on an engaging aesthetic. We want it to be user friendly for our partners at Coast and SV Bike to use it on their information. And we needed to be inexpensive. We didn't spend a lot of money. So we're going to go to the next slide and we're going to just show you the video and how it turned out. The video is on the website when you go to it, which is vision0.santabarbaraca.gov. Let's go to the next slide. And we're going to play this. I don't think we're hearing it. So why don't we start it over again? And then Jessica, why don't you cue on your camera so that we can hear maybe we can hear it through your camera.
Sure. Sorry, Rob. I will give me 1 minute. Every day, people walk, bike, and drive the streets and sidewalks of Santa Barbara as they go to work, school, run errands, or just have fun. Transportation and the ability to get around safely is essential for our daily lives. But too often, traffic-related collisions cause injury and even death. Santa Barbara has some troubling traffic collision and pedestrian safety statistics. It's time to reconsider our beliefs about what causes traffic-related collisions and how to prevent them. Because we can do better. That's why the Santa Barbara City Council adopted Vision Zero, a new strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries. Vision Zero is a smarter way to approach traffic safety. The concept was introduced in Sweden in the 1990s and has proven successful across Europe. Now it's gaining momentum in many cities in the USA. Vision Zero is a shift in thinking. Until now, traffic fatalities and severe injuries have been traditionally accepted as accidents. Yet in fact, each traffic-related collision has a cause and can be prevented. Vision Zero is centered on 4 areas of action. Evaluation, to focus city resources on locations where data shows that collisions are most likely to reoccur. Engineering, to design streets, bike lanes, and sidewalks that work better and that anticipate and eliminate the effects of human error. Enforcement, to ensure that safety laws are known and followed. Education, to bring about a new sense of awareness and shared responsibility for creating a safer Santa Barbara. Whether you walk, bike, drive a vehicle, or all 3, Santa Barbara needs your help. The success of Vision Zero requires the collaboration of all Santa Barbarians. Please join us. Together, we'll make our city better and safer for everyone. Visit the Vision Zero site where you can receive updates and take the pledge to make Vision Zero a part of your daily perspective.
So we hope you all will go to the website and take the pledge. So that's vision0.santabarbaraca.gov, and you can check out the website and then take the pledge. And so that's our intro into Vision Zero and getting people, just getting them an idea of what it's about. So we also have a campaign that's going to take this particular video and the website and put it into Spanish translation and build our effort in that campaign with that community. And again, we're encouraging people to share the road, and so what we'll do with this campaign, this initial campaign, is we can build on it with the branding. We can build on it and say drive certain messages. Like for instance, we're probably going to be driving the texting message, something about texting with commercials that are public service announcements, and we'll put them on the channel 18 and then the other outlets that we have, and make sure that gets out there. Next slide. And I think we're just going to answer questions now.
Well, I have one, but I'll wait and see if there's other committee members. Any members have questions for Rob? Hillary?
I'll just save mine for comments, I guess.
Okay. Eve? Can't hear.
Okay. Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
I was wondering, Rob, can you talk a little bit about how your team, what kind of partners you're looking to work with on this, especially of interest to me as the local media, since we know they play a really big role shaping the narrative around traffic safety in our city? Thank you.
That is such a good question. Thank you, committee member Sanford. Yeah, we want to, so we will push if someone has a positive message about traffic safety that's in line with Vision Zero, we will just gift them the logo and the media kit that we have and that we're building for them. And then the other thing that we're doing that's kind of interesting is we're also branding all of our projects that are safety oriented, which guess what is all of our projects. so you'll notice tonight when we talk about the restriping on Anacapa, it's the Vision Zero Anacapa one-way striping. It's going to be the Vision Zero, the West Side Connects Vision Zero project, the East Side Connects Vision Zero project. So we're going to start, and then you see the banner on the slide on your screen right now. See, that's a Public Works branding specifically. So City of Santa Barbara Public Works branding. All our presentations will now, we're going to fold them into a Vision Zero branding. And again, it's as much as we can, we want to push it out in front of you. Our consultant thinks that probably the thing that's most in motorists' face, which is kind of an interesting observation, is committee member Blackerby will probably want to say something about it, is an MTD bus. An MTD bus is on the road with us, and they sell advertising. So they could probably would be one of the partners, and they're probably looking for a revenue stream, which is important to them. So those are the kind of outlets, committee member Sanford, that we're looking at, and we're very open to creative ways of pushing it out.
Are there any other questions? Well, I have a question. I did go through it and I came to the Make the Pledge box, and that format is commonly used for lots of things, as we know. And my one question was, I hate to be like this, but okay, what are they going to do with my information? Why do they want my name and information? I don't expect you to ask me for donations, but are you allowed to summarize all the people who take the pledge, and are you going to market to them? I think people should feel really comfortable taking the pledge and have a sense of what good it's doing.
Madam Chair, I'm so glad you brought that up. I think that's really an important insight. We don't want to be just collecting people's information, and we don't want them to feel like we're going to hit them with more emails. That's the last thing people need. And we are working on that particular aspect of the website to do something that's unique that avoids that feeling. So we haven't really come up with it yet, but we are on that issue, and so glad that you concur that that's important.
Yeah, I'm just off the top of my head experiencing it. If there were bullet points right there that said this data will be used for, and say what it is in 2 or 3 bullet points, you could probably get it out. And then I think you'll get a better response. Okay, I think we're, Hillary, did you want to make a comment? Or are we done with questions?
And you might want to do public comment at some point in there.
Yeah. Eve, do you have another question?
Yeah, I do have another question. So Rob, I guess I'm just going to ask this in the form of a question rather than provide it in my comments, Rob and team. But in light of the sort of national movement that's going on right now, I know the transportation industry is having a sort of introspective look at how we do traffic enforcement and how that can lead to policing of communities of color disproportionately. And I know that traditionally Santa Barbara has applied for OTS grants annually and done quite well in getting those funding, getting those funds because of just the sheer number and volume of vehicle on person incidents we have in this community, or driver on person. And so I guess in light of that, I was hoping at some point you could maybe share a little bit of what the city of Santa Barbara is thinking about when it comes to traffic enforcement. And I know it might be too early to know exactly what that will look like, but I would certainly be interested in looking at how we do traffic enforcement to make sure that it's not leading to negative outcomes for individuals. Thanks.
Yeah, Committee Member Stanford, that's very insightful, particularly based on, what we've kind of been going through in this season in America right now. And that is kind of the challenge of Santa Barbara. Whenever I'm in a neighborhood meeting about neighbors and we're visit neighbors and they're in a circle and they're very angry about speeding on their street, with, over the years, how many meetings have I been to? One of the most common questions I ask them is how many people have received a ticket, a moving traffic violation in the city of Santa Barbara. And there's usually one person that raises their hands out of a big group, and it's just very uncommon. I came from Los Angeles. I don't know if it was that I was younger at the time, but I feel like I got pulled over. And we've been pulled over by the CHP, maybe in our, we could say that, but in Santa Barbara, you don't get pulled over as much. So, in the season, maybe that's good. But for traffic safety, if we don't have, particularly, I think with texting, it's going to be really hard if we don't have enforcement that's really broad about texting, because distracted driving is so on the rise. We were actually down to about 32,000 Americans deaths a year, and then when the cell phone came into existence, it just popped right back up because of the looking at the cell phone. And there's been some really good national campaigns, but it's our conviction that we're going to try to change the thinking through education, but there's going to have to be some sort of enforcement on that. And I'm not sure how to answer your question in the context of what we're going through right now. It doesn't seem, it seems very challenging to answer that question.
Hillary, did you want to make a comment? Ms. Blackerby?
I'll wait for public comment if there is any.
Okay. Okay, then let's move on to Michelle. Is that right?
That's,
My
yeah.
moderator? Yeah.
Ms. Bedard, yes.
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 Hi, Madam Chair. We do have a couple speakers. I see there are 4 attendees currently, and only one has their hand raised. So we'll go ahead and put, Jessica, if you'd put the timer slide on. And if anybody else in the attendees list would like to speak during public comment, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I will unmute Mr. Barry Remus in just a moment. Barry, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. This is Barry Remus on behalf of COAST, the Coalition for Sustainable Transportation, and also together with our partners at the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition, otherwise known as SB Bike. This has been a long time coming. We're really excited to see, after 3+, 4+ years of co-championing bringing bringing Vision Zero to Santa Barbara, we really are super excited to be able to see the city staff, our traffic engineering team, be able to roll out Vision Zero and do this outreach to be able to get the public to really know that it's out there. And we really want to obviously also thank Rob and his team and their consultant to be able to have already implemented many Vision Zero projects. So, as Rob mentioned, the boots are on the ground. And so we're really anxious to see this next step, and we're excited that both in English and Spanish, the community, as well as our tourism, which hopefully will increase at some point and come back to life, both tourists and residents alike will be able to know that Santa Barbara is in fact a Vision Zero city. The co-branding, the continuity is going to be key, and we really can't emphasize that enough. To be able to see that marketing out on the buses, I was going to say, thank you, Rob, for mentioning the MTD buses, because that's a good suggestion. And also the public-private partnerships, which I've brought up in the past about maybe bringing in hotels. so that they can have the handouts and little brochures available, so that our visitors to the city, when they stop by and are downtown and driving rental cars or walking or biking with the hotel bikes that they can rent, are aware of just what Vision Zero is, and that Santa Barbara is one of the key cities that will be leading the way to reduce fatal and severe collisions. So we really want to applaud the city for doing this, and we look forward to this rollout and being a part of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Do we have any more public comment requests?
Yes, Madam Chair. I received a message from Kent Epperson, excuse me, that he wished to speak. He did not raise his hand, but I wanted to give him the opportunity. I'm going to unmute and see if Kent is. Kent,
Yeah,
okay,
I'm
you are
here.
unmuted. You may go ahead.
I was going to speak on the State Street item.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the clarification. We'll add you then. And Madam Chair, this was going to be, I just wanted to let the board know, the committee know that Roxana Bonderson is available and listening. She is a new Planning Commission member and she is the TCC liaison. So she said she was just listening, but if you'd like her to present and introduce herself, I can promote her to a panelist and she can share her webcam. But I just want to let you know that she is here and she is listening.
Well, welcome, Roxanne, and thank you for participating.
Okay, and Madam Chair, I see nobody else with their hand raised at this time, so back to you.
Okay, I think Hillary, Ms. Blackerby.
Hi there. Could whoever's controlling the slides put those back up and go to the mode share slide? It was towards the beginning. Great, thank you. So one thing, so first of all, this is exciting. I know that the consultant's been working on this for, I think maybe well over a year at this point. So it's good to see it, some educational materials ready to roll out. And I like the idea of a pledge. One thing, and it's also good to read in the staff report that all this is going to be translated. This, I guess, is a question. I'm assuming there'll be printed materials. This is part of it, and some type of advertising, and the video will be translated and the website. I just want to ensure that the website is actually going to be like translated for real and not just Google Translate.
That's correct, Committee Member Blackerby. Yes, it'll be translated, and we do have printed materials as well.
Great, yeah, just making sure that those are sort of culturally competent, not just direct translation, would be good. And so on this mode question, right, public transit or taxi, right, that's 7%. And I think most of that's public transit. I don't know how many people use a taxi to get to work, but I don't think it's the bulk of that. Just thinking about, and especially if you plan on advertising to bus riders, right, of which there are thousands every day, even now, under this COVID reality. But all of these, and I'm used to this, but all of the references of like, these are all the ways you get around. It's always just walk, bike, or drive. And obviously the video is done, but thinking about ways in further targeted advertising and education about the reality of the fact that 7, or we'll say maybe 6% of our city gets to work. And of course, people travel other places than work. on the bus. So just thinking about, again, in another type of cultural competency, but talking to people about getting to their bus stop safely, right? And a lot of that, of course, everyone's a pedestrian until they get on the bus. So just thinking about ways to really kind of unerase the fact that it's a pretty sizable mode for our community, I think would be great. Something jumped out at me. I appreciate Committee Member Sanford's comments on enforcement, and it's a tough one to square at this point. Just something that popped out at me on the video. No need to replay it, just watch it on your own time. The slides on enforcement, the little police officer icon does like something with his arm that just looked super off for me. So you might want to review that in light of sort of current conversations around policing and white supremacy. So I'm excited we're moving in this direction. I hope that there will be lots of ways for people to get involved. Obviously, if we get to a point as a community where we can gather again, I think there are a lot of opportunities to engage at the normal, festivals and things like that, but also maybe do some creative activations to engage people on this. And the other thing I appreciate about the video and the messaging is the, removal about accidents, right? Because there aren't really accidents in these kind of things for the vast majority of collisions and serious injuries. And I also agree with Ms. Sanford about the coverage and media discussion of collisions, right? That if a pedestrian or a bicyclist are hit, they're hit by a car, they're not hit by a person driving a car, and those things. And the city is certainly not responsible for that kind of sort of bias in the media, but I think it's something that as that outreach is done, we need to call those things out, because it really most times puts the blame on the victim of these serious injuries. So that's all for now. Thanks.
Very good. Very useful. Any other comments at this time? Well, I think we can, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. We have made tremendous progress. I think it would be nice to move on to the Anacapa Street Vision Zero restriping project.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, and we'll bring up the slides for that. And then when you start up, we could go to the next slide. This is Anacapa Street Vision Zero restriping, and what we did is with council is we actually took this one to council and asked them to direct us on this. So we were intending to come to the Transportation Circulation Committee, and sorry we didn't have the meetings organized enough to do that. One of the things that we do for Vision Zero that's really interesting is that whenever we repave the street, we have an opportunity to look at the striping to see if the striping is Vision Zero, is it the kind of striping we want. And how many know right now we've got a lot of resurfacing downtown, and that Measure C money that Santa Barbarans have voted for is being spent, and our streets are now getting paved. And so we have all this opportunity to look at Vision Zero striping, because we lay down that asphalt and we have a clean slate, and we can look at would there be better ways to do things. So let's look at Anacapa on the next slide. Anacapa is well, and just as a reminder, this is an engineering approach. So when we talk about the 4 E's, education, evaluation, enforcement, engineering, what we're talking about is the engineering portion. So go to the next slide. We have Anacapa, which is a one-way street from Mission down to Gutierrez. It travels parallel to State Street. So you can think of it as a one-way couplet with Santa Barbara Street on the east side of State Street, or you can think about it as a one-way couplet with Chapala Street on either side of Santa Barbara. But it's one way. It's 2 lanes, the most of the direction. Just at the end, it narrows to 1 lane right before Gutierrez Street, but it's 2 lanes the entire way. And this street is getting repaved. So next slide, you'll see what it looks like downtown. And it, you know, the one-way streets, some cities have gone back to 2-way. We've really capitalized on the capacity that these streets provide. We're not expecting bikes to go down the street, although I got to tell you, as a cyclist, it's a very comfortable street. I remember a conversation with one of our cycling community members, Robert Bernstein, and he questioned me going down the street, and we went on a ride and went down it. And you actually can take the lane. The signals are timed for 25 miles an hour, so it's slow, but it keeps moving and moves a lot of cars. This is right downtown, just past Figueroa Street. And it moves a lot of cars. And then let's look at another place, go to the next slide. And Anacapa is a really different type of street up in the neighborhood, up in the Upper East neighborhood. And this is right below Mission, right after Pedregosa. It's a neighborhood. It's not a downtown urban field. It's more of a suburban field, and it's a neighborhood. However, the street is still 2 lanes. It doesn't need the 2 lanes for capacity, but it is still 2 lanes. Next slide. And you can see what some of the things that might occur with having a 2-lane road where there's not a lot of traffic on Anacapa. For instance, you see the vehicle on the left. Let's say there was a pedestrian who was crossing the corner from left to right. The car is blinding you. Let's say you're in the right lane, blinding you from seeing that pedestrian, and that white van stops. But you keep going because you're not sure why they're stopped. That's called a double threat, and the pedestrian can get hit. So it does have some safety issues, particularly when there's not a lot of traffic. And the other thing is with other streets on like De La Vida, for instance, we do have people turning left from the right lane, thinking it's a 2-way street. That happens on this street. And then right beyond this intersection, this is the intersection at Valerio, right beyond this intersection, there's a daycare center, a nursery school called Bright Start. It's very popular. They have lots of students. And so a lot of drop-offs happen right down here on the right past Valerio in the morning and in the afternoon. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting about this Vision Zero project is we don't have a lot of documented patterns. We have spot cases of collisions, but very little of a pattern here. And so when we're going through the restriping process, one of the questions we asked ourselves, well, the capacity is not needed. We don't need 2-lane capacity for Anacapa in the residential section. Do we want to go to 1 lane? And to answer that question, we talked to the Bright Start parents, and we talked to the Upper East Side Association. We actually visited them. We explained that there was a possibility to go to 1 lane. And they did a survey. They surveyed their entire East Side Association population. And then the Bright Start parents wrote in and they said, yes, go to 1 lane, go to 1 lane. So how would we do that? And what are the things that we need to think about if we're going to go to 1 lane on Anacapa? And this is a very interesting conversation for the committee and for really how Santa Barbans see our program. Next slide. So the section of roadway we're talking about going from 2 to 1 lane, again, it's just the residential portion. It's from Mission Street to right just before Mitchell-Churena. So there is the first signal is at Mitchell Terrena, and the one lane section would end right before Mitchell Terrena, so that there's 2 lanes at the signal. Next slide. How do you stripe from 2 lanes to 1 lane? Well, the answer on Chapala Street back in, I think this was it was the early 2000s. This was 2 lanes. Chapala was 2 lanes. This is exactly the same thing. Remember, I was talking about the couplet being Anacapa, Chapala on either side of State Street. The Chapala residents did not want 2 lanes because they felt people were speeding on their street. And so we put in a bike lane. And when you put in a bike lane, that's a way, and you can see the bike lane in the screen, that's a way of making the street go from 1 lane to 2, because you can't just eliminate a stripe and just keep a big wide street. You actually have to have a lane line, and you can see the car up ahead outside of the bike lane in that lane line. If you go to the next slide, I'll tell you why we really did not want to put in a bike lane. So if you look at the bicycle master plan and all the facilities we're going to try to put in the next 5 years, which is every line represented on the map, some of them are already in, you see the encircled in red, you see the Anacapa Street that we're talking about. It does not connect to the bicycle network. Sure, there's bicycles going down Anacapa, but in order to earn the trust and high regard of our community, we were very hesitant to put a bike lane in just 1 section. There's no sign on the side of the road that says, hey, we didn't want a bike lane here. We just did it for striping reasons. It's really a Vision Zero project. And there's no way to communicate to that motorist that it's not a bike lane. So what we think is if we put in a bike lane, that people would say, what's going on with the city of Santa Barbara? They just put in bike lanes, this doesn't make any sense. And we create confusion, we create resentment. And so we did not want to put that striping in. So we thought very hard, what kind of striping could we put in? And we've never done anything like this. So it was kind of interesting thinking in the conversation. Let's go to the next slide and we'll show you how we thought to do it. So this is called a buffered striping. Now you've seen the bicycle buffered lanes on CODA, and that buffered striping you're seeing, which is the crosshatch, 2 lines with the crosshatch. That's the buffered area. But in this case, we're not buffering a bike lane. In this case, we're buffering 2 parking lanes. And think about this. And when we first started talking about this, we started to get very excited. And this is what the East Side, Upper East Side Association sent to their constituents. They sent and I'll show you the next one in a little bit. They sent a diagram like this to show what it would be like, and also the Bright Start kids. So you can imagine if you're pulling over, let's say the Bright Start's right on the right, and you're going to drop your kid off to nursery in the morning, you've got this nice buffer to open your door into and get out and away from traffic. It's a single lane, so we are going to see a decrease in speed because 80% of the drivers in Santa Barbara drive a prudent speed and within the speed limit. So if you're a speeder, you're probably going to get behind a prudent driver. It's a long enough street, and we're going to probably reduce speeds. And then you've got all this accommodation for room for neighbors getting in and out of their car. When someone parks, they pull into the buffer and park. The dimensions, just so you know, it's 8 feet for the parking lanes, 5 feet for the 2 buffer zones, and 10 feet for the center drive lane. And let's go to the next slide, and I'll show you how it works at intersections. The great thing about the buffers versus putting in a bike lane is the buffers put the vehicle lane right in the middle of the street, right in the very center, which means that when you get in an intersection, and you can see an intersection there, it means that you create the best sight lines because the vehicle's right in the middle. So the sight lines get longer for pedestrians to see, for motorists to see pedestrians, for more time to react and get out of the way. You eliminate the double threat of one car stopping and the other one going, and then someone turning left from the right lane. The Upper East Side very strongly, a very, very strong majority of their constituents voted in favor of this. The Bright Start parents wrote in letters to council. We took this to council and they agreed with the striping. We also walked, this is in council member Snedden's district, and spoke with her about it. And then this was approved at council. So next slide, I think that's it. And we might want to actually, so that's what we did, the process we went through. The striping right now, if you drive down Anacapa Street, it's not striped yet, but the paving's in. And if you look carefully, the markings for the lane lines are in and ready for the striper. What happens is if you're kind of wondering about why do these streets stay black so long and then we don't get the lines on them and it's confusing. Well, what happens is, to save money, is the striper comes up to Santa Barbara and stripes a bunch of streets all at once rather than going back and forth. So our striper is going to be coming up in July, and you'll see those stripes in. And I think that's it. If you go to the next slide, I think that's the question slide. Madam Chair, we'll entertain any questions. Why don't you back up one just so we could see the diagram on that one?
Yeah, it's a good idea.
And by the way, I know I'm doing a lot of talking here today, but you know, the entire team working on these projects. We got Jessica Grant, we got Sam Fertner, who's working a lot on Vision Zero, obviously Derek Bailey and his staff and engineering staff. So we have quite a team working on these projects. Happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any question requests out there? David?
Yeah, hi Rob. So I'm just curious, I'm not sure when the travel time tests were done that were listed in the report, but my understanding, given having only lived in Santa Barbara about 2 years and change, and with the recent closure of State Street, you know, if there's a possibility that State Street continues to be closed for an extended period of time, or that leads into a more permanent closure, is there any concern about travel times if State Street were to be closed?
Committee Member Collum, that is an awesome question. That's exactly the kind of thinking we want to see from the committee. And so this section would go back to 2 lanes at Mitchell Terrena, and then we'll get into it with the next item. But if, let's just say, the city council wanted to retain the pedestrian promenade to Sola or Victoria, that is about 3 blocks down from Mitchell Terrena. 1 block from Sola, 2 blocks down from Mitchell Terrena. So they're not going to be parallel to one another. So we'll have the capacity where people are getting off State and on to Anacapa, which happens mainly at Mitchell Terrena, which is right below Mitchell Terrena would be the 2-lane section. But that's excellent thinking. The other thing is that we actually coned off a lane. And that was pre-COVID. That was when we were having standard traffic volumes on the street, very typical. And we did those real-time measurements of speed and of timing. We did a very similar exercise on De La Vida as well.
Right, yeah, that's my understanding. I'm just curious because those travel times were clearly done before the State Street closure. And so, you know, I was just curious if that was in consideration, and it sounds like it has been, so that's good.
Do we have any other questions? Committee Member Sanford.
Okay, hi, thank you. Yeah, I just have a quick question about the design. I think one of the reasons why bike lanes are important are not obviously to protect or to sort of provide space for cycling or for people riding bikes, but also just to provide predictability to drivers as to where to expect bicyclists in the road. And so I was just wondering, I also recall, like, at the last TCC meeting when we were talking about the De La Vina project, and one of the most common accidents on De La Vina is car drivers turning into or sideswiping other people in cars. So in this project in particular, is there an aspect of the design that's going to help drivers to just kind of look left and right before they make that turn at the intersection. Because especially with these one-way streets, you can get on a sort of one-track mind where you're just driving and going in one direction, and there's not that friction to alert you to other people in the road. And so without the sort of sanctioned bike lane, is there another way to encourage drivers to look before they turn onto the side streets? Thank you.
Such a good question, Madam Chair, Committee Member Sanford, and you give me an opportunity because I missed something. One of the most exciting things, and so to really answer your question, we won't know till we see it, but we think that we will see a slower street. We think because the vehicles are positioned in the middle of the intersection, it'll be better visibility for all. There will only be one lane to turn from, so we're not going to see that that side-by-side challenge. But here's the cool thing. Yes, we're not providing a bike lane per se, but the buffer is the same exact width of a bike lane. So if you're a cyclist on this street, you're going to feel very comfortable in that buffer. You're gonna just by normal inclination, you're going to ride on the right, and you're going to be in that buffer. Anacapa is pretty comfortable on a bicycle right now as it is, because you just take the lane and there's so few cars, they just go around you. This will provide a location for cycling without the distraction of or miscommunication to the public as why did they put a bike lane here? So we're really hoping that this is that this really knocks it out of the park in terms of the goals of Vision Zero and visibility at intersections and cycling. And we haven't seen this type of striping in other communities, so it'll be really interesting to see how it works out.
Any other questions?
I guess just one follow-up question to that. So just to be perfectly clear, part of why we didn't want to put a bike lane on this stretch of Anacapa is because we didn't want to create a sort of fragment in the bike network that doesn't really connect to other routes very well. Right?
A little bit different way to explain it is, I wasn't worried about that. I wasn't worried about a fragment. There is a percentage of our population that's very outspoken that believes, mistakenly, that Santa Barbara is taking away lanes and discouraging driving. And that's just not true. As a matter of fact, and I'm glad you're teeing me up, thank you, is our program favors driving. We're going to be a driving community. The majority of us drive. The program that we have is environmentally friendly. It's a great lifestyle to promote cycling. But the key reason that got us into cycling was back in the 60s, we did not want to be like Los Angeles. We did not want traffic congestion. And so as we grow as a city, we're going to grow incrementally. It's slow, we grow, but we grow. Santa Barbara has very limited capacity for vehicles. There will be a time if we keep growing and we don't shift into different modes that we will have traffic congestion, and then we'll be like LA, and that's not the Santa Barbara way. So, but in the meantime, I think this population that doesn't know that and has somehow gotten it sideways that we're actually trying to eliminate lanes, what we didn't want is to put a bike lane in and have them confused in their head about our intentions, because it might feel like to one of those people who has that perspective, look at them, they did it again. They're just putting in a bike lane to put in a bike lane and take away the lane, and it doesn't even go anywhere on top of that. So in this way, we're not communicating by putting in these buffers. We're not communicating to that because it doesn't have a bike lane. So the purpose must have been something else. Maybe they won't know. Hopefully we'll be able to explain that. But at the same time, the cyclist that goes down the street will have a space where they can be out of the traffic lane. So I got to say, the day we came up with this idea, I was pretty excited because I hate miscommunication in the city. We are anti-traffic congestion. We want people to be able to drive and be able to drive without congestion and then bike wherever they want to safely. That's what we're all about. I hope
Thanks
that
for
helps.
Yeah, really interesting perspective. Thank you.
Committee member column.
Yes, thank you. So I guess committee member Sanford raised a little bit of a question there. This might sound like a little bit of a comment from me, but I'm concerned because the statement that the buffer zone can be used as a bike lane creates some ambiguity for drivers and cyclists alike, in my opinion. So you're looking at this bike lane now that doesn't look like a bike lane that's actually in the door zone for cars. And I'm curious if there's if we're talking about that being a de facto bike lane without messaging, I'm wondering if there's any consideration given to how to give some sort of indication that bikes will be there, because I mean, generally speaking, when there's a bike lane right there in the door zone, then drivers are more aware. They might engage in the Dutch reach to make sure that they're looking for cyclists or other indicators. So is there at all a concern about that mixed messaging?
Madam Chair, Committee Member McCollum, it's a great concept or thought about why that might be an issue. You're right. Bike lanes are in the door zone. So, so when someone opens the door, if you're not on the outside edge, you can get hit. There's probably about so it's an 8-foot parking lane. So the door zone is right at about 9.5. So 3.5 feet of the buffer is outside of the door zone, which is a good portion. We're not concerned about it. However, this is new striping, so we're going to need to look at it. And if we see that there's ambiguity, confusion about anticipation and what's going on, it's not a commercial area. People don't get in and out of their cars very often, and so. But if there is an issue, we may have to develop some signing that states, cyclists are using the buffer zone, watch out for cyclists in the buffer zone. So, something that will attune people to that. We don't think it's going to be an issue, but it's an insightful thing that we've thought about, and we could be wrong about that. We might need to put up some additional signage.
Okay, and I mean, it's good to hear that you're thinking about it, but just to be clear, it will be indicated as a buffer zone and not as a bike lane, correct?
It won't have a sign.
Okay.
So you'll see it. We see people riding in the buffer zone in the opposite direction on Coda all the time. It seems like people are pretty comfortable with that. But we'll see. It's not gonna say you can't ride in it. It's not gonna say anything. It's just gonna have that paint, and people won't drive in it. That's the main thing that's gonna happen. And then we'll see what cyclists do. We're thinking they'll either take the lane or they'll go into the buffer lane.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Well, I have a couple, maybe question/comment, Rob. I'm concerned, having lived here for a lot of years, of people just absent-mindedly heading down Anacapa and going, what's wrong? Where's my lane? Why am I supposed to be in the middle of the street? This feels really weird. So I'm concerned about drivers having their habits. And I guess my other question, you answered it already, that there is a striped buffer zone on Coda. Will this have the same colors, the same configuration? Because I think this is such a new concept for Santa Barbara. If I go down that street without knowing anything, my mind is not going to register. I'll be going through, okay, what kind of a deal is this? This is not in my memory bank. What am I supposed to do here? So that's how I'm feeling. And I don't want accidents because people are confused. So yeah, I don't know, maybe putting it on KEYT let John Palmentary tell everybody what's happening would be excellent. The Independent, other sources to inform, I think will be really helpful, and maybe even some signage when you first do it.
Yeah, we will do all that. You will, when you go down the street, it's good that you will be probably going, what's going on, which is really good, because then your conscience is engaged, and you're not driving with your subconscious, you're driving with your conscience. which is good. You're more aware. And then there's so much, there'll be so much striping on the street. You'll know the only place you can be is in the middle. And so, but again, you're right. It's and people have been pointing this out. It's new, and we need to see how it goes. Incidentally, I should say though, if this is successful, we anticipate also polling the Upper East Side neighborhood on the Couplet Street, which is Santa Barbara, through the neighborhood, because we also are hearing from the neighborhood a lot of speeding on Santa Barbara Street.
Well, to piggyback on that, are we going to have green on our bike lanes eventually?
Yes, we are on the east side connects, and there's green. It's intersection conflict zone striping on east side connects and west side connects.
Because our neighboring city, Goleta, has a lot of those green, and they always make me happy. They're really, makes it real easy.
Striping.
Is there another color? I don't know if other cities, because you do look at so many other cities. If these buffer zones became really widely used, it might be really great if we came up with a color that was uniform for buffer zones, as well as a color for bike lanes. I think anything that helps people get it is useful, and color seems to really help. So
white is the standard buffer striping, and then if you want to get a hang for what these look like, also, if you've all been in the Castillo and Bath Couplet bike lanes, buffer lanes are also added on those streets.
Okay, they're already there.
They're there.
I'm driving on them all the time. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Hillary?
Is there any public comment?
Michelle, is there any public comment? Thank you, Hillary.
Video. Okay, yes, Madam Chair, we do have one person with their hand raised. And
Great.
if anybody else, we have 4 people in attendee. We have the public, how to make an oral public comment. So this is a nice little descriptive instructions here. If you wish to speak during public comment, you'll just want to raise your hand in the control panel as shown on the screen. Meanwhile, I will go ahead and unmute Mr. Barry Remus. Barry, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Guess who? It's Barry Remus again. Thank you. Coast just wants to really thank the city and the team, the whole city team, for really seizing this opportunity and tying again into the Vision Zero mantra. We were pleased to speak in support of this when it went to City Council, and again, apologies on behalf of the team that you weren't able to hear this then due to COVID. We anticipate that while this is an exciting new appearance for a restriping in the city, we do anticipate that both motor vehicle drivers and cyclists will adjust to this accordingly. I was also going to mention the notion of doing some media time with KEYT, to get the word out when this striping occurs, so that people are ready for it. We anticipate that cyclists, there's 2 types of cyclists. You've got the ones that already ride on Anacapa Street, and those people may opt to just ride in the center travel lane with the cars, or as some people say, take the lane. Others may opt to choose the potential of the safety of the buffered lane. And I tend to echo Mr. Dayton. We don't seem to anticipate there being too much of an issue here. What we really do want to highlight here is just, again, taking advantage of the opportunity to provide increased safety for pedestrians at intersections, for the drop-off zones, and pickup zones for both for the daycare and also Notre Dame School as well too. And the addition of, I believe, a new marked crosswalk at one of the intersections as well. I can't recall which it is, but Mr. Dayton might be able to reference it. That also would add safety as well. So again, kudos to the team. We thank you. We appreciate that, and also want to appreciate the questions from committee members Sanford and Collum, especially regarding the traffic volume with the opening of State Street. We like to say opening instead of closing. More on that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Madam Chair, seeing no one else with their hands raised for this item, I will go ahead and turn it back to you.
Thank you. Is there we don't have to have a vote on any of these. This is nice informational backfilling. Is there any additional comment or questions? Ms. Blackerby.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting situation. I wouldn't make any bets as to how how cyclists and motorists will react to it without seeing it. I agree that cyclists will probably bike in the buffer, but one of the things that worries me about kind of I love buffered bike lanes, but if you ever go up Bass in the area where there's a buffered lane, I would say probably almost every time I've been on that street, generally as a motorist, or the times when I've been on it as a motorist, there's always someone driving in the buffer. So even though there's one lane and there's really a lot of people use it as kind of a turn lane to turn right off of Bath, even though they, have the full lane to themselves, and it's a pretty low volume street. So I'm a little concerned about that. So I do think it's important to have some messaging out there about like, hey, when you visit Anacapa next, this is how you should drive on it. And I guess we just tell cyclists, do what feels right, but make yourself seen. What Mr. Dayton brought up about congestion, and I know a lot of times Rob likes to talk about we and sort of speak on behalf of Santa Barbarans, but I just want to put out there that we really coddle motorists, I think, to our detriment sometimes. Obviously, yes, it's a large percentage, and I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy a lot of times. And I'm personally disappointed that we're getting away from the vehicle miles traveled standard that's required in some projects now from the state, and still focusing on level of service for our intersections, because frankly, the thing that gets people to shift mode is traffic congestion. And sometimes it gets, people who work for cities blamed for all the ills in the world. But honestly, until people are a little bit inconvenienced on their drive, they're not going to ride their bike. They're not going to take the bus in the numbers that we frankly need in order to keep our planet from melting down. So I just want to name that, at least for me, to use an I statement about being a Santa Barbaran. I actually think people could handle a little more congestion and recognize what that means and what that would mean for them, and maybe changing human behavior, which, as we know, is the hardest part. So I just want to put that out there, because that's not 100% how everyone in Santa Barbara feels about it. And I'm also not particularly scared of people being upset about a bike lane. Not that that was necessarily the right thing for this stretch of Anacapa, but I think, things can be proposed when they're really the right thing to do. And then we see what the public says. And then as decision makers, we make decisions. So I just wanted to put that out there, but we'll see how this one goes.
Thank you, Ms. Blackerby.
Madam Chair, I do want to speak to that directly, because it's, I hope I didn't mislead you. I'm not speaking off of Rob Dayton's head. I'm speaking from the policies and that are approved by the city of Santa Barbara. And I'll just read from the circulation element. This is the primary goal of the circulation law, is to create an integrated multimodal transportation system to connect people, places, goods, and services by providing a choice of transportation modes and decreasing vehicle traffic congestion. So at the heart of Santa Barbara, this started in the 60s. It's a part of the environmental movement. We don't want to be like LA, and it's very in our DNA. So I just want to be really careful that, and I appreciate committee member Blackerby having her own set of views, but I'm speaking from the policies approved by council. And it's a very important issue for us because we commonly are being misunderstood in government, which is, as you can see in the last 2 months, there's a lot of misunderstanding across our country. We want to be really clear of our intentions and the policies of the council and how we move forward, that we are not doing a lane narrowing to create congestion in the name of bikes or anything else. So I just wanted to make that clear. It's not from my personal views.
I wasn't saying it was your personal, but you often say like Santa Barbara says, and I know it's in the circulation element. It's actually a rather lovely circulation element, but just because it's in the circulation element and councils past have adopted that, it doesn't mean that's, we don't all have to agree on what the driving force of transportation planning is in the city. And so I just wanted to say that I think sometimes there's a reason for that. We're pretty far from becoming Los Angeles, I would say. And they're actually making some progress as well.
Well, I'm glad we are. Any other comments at this time? Anybody? Okay, I think I just want to kind of make one comment after hearing everyone else that I think there might be some need to have some sort of signage that says bikes are allowed and not have it be completely ambiguous, but that's just how it feels from the comments, and I don't need any response, just putting that out there. Eve Sanford, did you want to make another comment?
Yes, I do. I also had a comment that I wasn't able to provide on the last item. Sorry, the new format threw me off, but is it possible to comment on the Vision Zero item before we move on as a committee?
Yeah, it's best to do it now before we get on to the third topic.
Okay, my first comment is to Vision Zero, and sorry for not saying it on the earlier item, but at one point in my work at the Santa Barbara Bike Coalition, there had been discussion around and with SBPD around a traffic diversion program, which essentially would create a traffic school for people who receive bicycling tickets. I think it's a really important equity program for this city to look into pursuing, because if you don't know, oftentimes, or well, I think always, a bicycle ticket, if you get a ticket for breaking a vehicular law while riding your bike, you're sometimes paying the same amount as if you were driving, and so the punishment doesn't quite match the crime. And the state about 4 or 5 years ago finally kind of updated their state level policies to allow local jurisdictions to create these ticket diversion programs where instead of just paying a fine and it being a sort of once and done fee that you're forced to pay, you could actually go to an educational program and learn more about how to ride safely and how to navigate safely in traffic. And so I was at the city council meeting that happened around Black Lives Matter and some of the demands that our city council is moving to meet and to look and restructure within SBPD. And although this program wasn't called out because there's obviously a lot more pressing issues, I would really support anything our city could do in looking into creating such a program, because I think it would be very much in line with some of the conversation we're having locally. And I also want to note that with the with the way things are being restructured, in particular street sweeping being moved over to the transportation department, I wonder if this could be part of that trend where if you receive a ticket, you're able to deal. Anyways, you could deal with it and actually learn from it and go to a traffic school that helps you to become a safer cyclist. And then secondly, I guess speaking to this project, I would in general in the city support typically calling out where bikeways are, just because I do find that from my own personal experience cycling in other communities, part of what creates a culture of safety is when drivers know where to expect bicyclists on the road. Again, like committee member Colum pointed to, dooring is particularly an issue. And I think if you're a driver and you know you're parked next to a bike lane, you're a little more attentive to preventing yourself from dooring someone. And so I understand that this project is unique and that we're going to pursue it and evaluate it, which I fully support. But I would just say as a general principle, oftentimes I feel like the best thing you can do is actually note and like really support that this is where the bicyclist is in the road. It both like validates the individual who's riding to feel more confident in their right to be out there riding their bike, but also really serves as a note to drivers. That way it becomes ingrained in how they navigate the city that they're expecting a cyclist. And then lastly, I just would like to say, I'm really curious how, and it's okay if this is less a question, but more a comment, but I'd be really interested in how the evaluation of this project is going to go, and whether that's going to be like an in the field survey where the city's observing how drivers are interacting with bicyclists on the road. It does seem like since we're taking a new approach here, there's an educational, almost a research opportunity to sort of evaluate how, if our desired outcomes are being met with the new design. Thank you.
Interesting comments. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to add anything? I think we've given Mr. Dayton some excellent feedback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will, it is a rich conversation from all different perspectives, and we will have to see how this goes and make adjustments accordingly.
We want it to be successful. Well, my goodness, now we've hit the big topic of the evening, the State Street reopening and parklets. That's a cute name. So
yeah, parklets. Yeah, this is actually pretty crazy topic for us. This is when we were in the COVID situation, in the midst of it in the beginning, and things were closed down. There wasn't a lot of activity, and State Street was kind of becoming a little bit ghosty, a lot ghosty actually. But one of the interesting things about what's happened, and maybe one of the positive outcomes of a very negative situation, is this State Street reemergence. So we're gonna talk to you about it. It's interesting, in my career, the most asked question that I've had in my career is, when are we going to close State Street to vehicles? That is if I was to bet which question you're going to ask, that's the one I get asked on the street the most. And it's really interesting. The Nick Welsh he does the Angry Poodle Barbecue, and this week he's talking about how when this was brought up in the past in 1992, and staff was saying it's probably not going to be for another 20 or 30 years, and here we are talking about closing State Street. So things do change in Santa Barbara. So let's I'm gonna just take you through a visual presentation. This is a visual presentation, and give you a little real-time information, the committee, on what has been going on. Usually city government responds very, very slowly with standards and process and Historic Landmarks Commission, and this was not that. This is very, very fast rollout. And so let's walk through it, and we'll tell you the highs and lows and what's been going on and where the conversation might go. So why don't we advance to the next slide? It kind of starts with empty parking lots in downtown. And interesting, the work we did during COVID really shifted to work that was less active, and we got a lot of stuff done. And these parking lots were the reason we weren't working as much. We lost a lot of money in downtown parking, $2.5 million in just this last quarter, because our customers are not showing up and paying, and we're already seeing that the demand is down. Number of reasons for that. Next slide. Businesses on State Street. We're really trying to get people to come in for takeout. Some people did the takeout, some people didn't do the takeout. It depends on their restaurant model. Most restaurateurs were telling us that's a losing proposition for them, unless they already have a steady clientele and that's hooked up to their takeout. Next slide, we saw businesses closed and State Street kind of dead. And then all of a sudden we had this order from the governor that, hey, we're going to open up. It happened just 5 short weeks ago, right before Memorial Day. Next slide. And so we had to get into gear really fast. And the city council had a discussion about State Street. And on the table were a couple, maybe we should close some blocks. Maybe it's the 500 block or the 1200 block. And those 2 blocks have a lot of restaurants. The reason we were talking about closing State Street was for the purposes of restaurants. You'll remember when the governor first opened, restaurants could only have outdoor seating, and then soon after that, only limited space inside could actually take place, and certain percentages were only allowed. Which, if you know anything about the restaurant business, you have to operate at 100% at your peak times to make your margins. And so the purpose of closing State Street was really about giving restaurants a space to move out in so that they could actually be successful. So that's what it was initially about. And guess what? The city council said, let's just open it all. And so we did that from Haley. We opened the street to people from Haley to Sola. Someone donated some trees, some pinwheel trees, and you're seeing them. We were installing them on the Friday. This is the Friday before Memorial Day when we were closing. Next slide. And those are the trees that are blocking the street. We're bringing in K-rail as well to block the street. We have a bus at the other end. I'm going to show you the picture of the bus. We're going to replace the bus with K-rail to make it safe in case someone comes up the street going really, really fast. Next slide. There was ambiguity about where to put the restaurant. Initially, we thought we put it in the street. This meeting was all the restaurateurs coming in the 500 block to talk about where did they want the restaurant. And there was a unanimous vote that they all wanted it right next to the building. That's where they wanted the restaurant to be. Sure. So go to the next slide, and you saw right away that, and this is, I think, is a picture of Joe's, and they put their seating right next to the restaurant. That's where they could most quickly use the outdoor space. The problem became very quickly that although we were saying go ahead and walk in the street, people also wanted to walk on the sidewalk, and we had ADA issues. So we moved that you had to provide a pathway on the sidewalk. We changed the rules. By the way, we've changed the rules. The first 10 days, I think we changed the rules maybe once or twice a day. That fluid, and we'd hear of an issue, and we changed the rules, and we'd repost it. So next slide. The cruisery, this is on the corner of Haley and State, and you can see where the 400 block, which is a topic of much discussion today. We were meeting with council members, Alejandra and Oscar Gutierrez, and the 400 block, both their districts bump up to this block, and we were talking to business owners. They really would like this to be closed, and it's not viable at this time for safety reasons, but we're trying to work out some solutions. Next slide. Alexa, skip to happy hour. So this became the thing is that, now this sign, not permitted in the public right of way, not HLC approved. However, now it's in the street. Really, anything has gone is under the council's ordinance, which they passed an ordinance which allows all this. Everything is happening in the street. Next slide. First day, that first Friday, we found out that Councilmember Gutierrez does own an electric bike, and it's a really cool one. Great picture and great to see people out here. And this was the amazing part for all of us. Scary and amazing, kind of mixed emotions, is the moment we closed this street, opened the street, people started showing up. So next slide. And it was really remarkable that first Friday evening, we were just sitting on the sidewalk. This is the first Friday. There's no restaurants on the street yet, first Friday. And here we have kids starting to rollerblade, cyclists up and down the street, people walking in the street. Next slide. And it wasn't just a little bit, it was a lot of it. There was a lot of people in the street. And again, we're just sitting on the side, just going, what is going on? And was it people are just so needed to get out because they've been in their homes for so long? Was it curiosity about the opening? We've really been asking ourselves a question about what was the reason and why does it continue to escalate in terms of activity? Next slide. The farmers market, really interesting thing, has been extremely flexible. Sam Edelman, who's the leader in the 500 block, since the restaurants were moving out, it wasn't appropriate for a farmers market to be there. So Sam Edelman and the farmers said, hey, we'll just move up some blocks. And then we said, by the way, if you're going to move up into the 700 and the 800, which are between Ortega, De La Guerra, and Canna Perdido, go ahead and push up into the 800 as much as you like, because you got lots of room. And they have. So this last Tuesday, they were all the way to Canna Perdido Street. Next slide. We had some, go to the next slide. We had some construction going on. We actually, Public Works repaved the street very, very quickly in anticipating that we might open it to pedestrians. So we eliminated all the lines on the asphalt section, and we were just finishing up on that Tuesday after the opening, and we had some finishing touches. So that's what you see is the last minute construction finish work. Next slide. But the market, huge success in the, and you wouldn't, like, you can't imagine that this is 3 days after the governor opens the city up. It's just, it's remarkable. And notice how many masks you see. We didn't see many, and it was very concerning right away. You know, we wanted to be responsible to get business going, but we also wanted people to be safe. So we'll talk about what we've added to the street to try to attempt to do that in addition to the governor's order. Next slide. The guidelines, as I said, these are on our website, which is outdoordining.santabarbara.ca or santabarbaraca.gov. So outdoordining.santabarbaraca.gov has the outdoor dining guide. It has the parklet guide. It has a guide to starting in the restaurant in your parking lot. And it has the tools of the temporary ordinance. It points you in the right direction for your alcohol license. And incidentally, ABC, which is Alcoholic Beverage Commission, they have been probably more flexible than the city, which is hard to believe. They even have to-go alcohol that you can go up the street and drink. A very interesting change in rules to accommodate everything. Next slide. So going in the emergence, we saw this the following week after the opening. Institutional got their ABC license, and you can see, wow, some people are gonna come out into the street. It's very interesting. Next slide. And then you see right away they're filling that area, and you can see in the background, even beyond that, other people coming out with temporary Holdrens and Sandbar. Holdrens as reporting doing some of the best business they've ever done. In next slide, and then more and more the 500 block coming out. The allowance is 14 feet for a fire truck. Said the fire department said they need 14 feet to get through there. This was kind of interesting. Bike rack used to be in the street. You know, it's a good one for bikes. Taking over the street. Next slide. Yeah, Pastoria, and this is the 1000 block across from Chase Grill. So you can kind of see the different ways that people are coming out. Some looks more permanent than others. Some has plantings. Some has nicer tables. Some people are actually buying tables to be in the street. Next slide. And then we had some very interesting requests. So this is Santa Barbara Street in front of Llama Dog. Santa Barbara Street, this is down in the funk zone. And it's pretty much almost a dead end street, although you can get around to Gray. And they requested to do a half closure. So this is one car at a time going. You see the stop sign, one lane road, one car at a time. We're actually pulling this back another 3 feet from where it is. Because we're restoring parking on the other side. So again, we try something, people put something out there, and then we've got to make adjustments. What we've been telling City Council is nimble, flexible. So let people have permission, go do it, and then we come out and say, hey, can we adjust this for ADA? Can we make this adjustment for visibility and working with the business owners? Next slide. So State Street, you can see here at Joe's and the other cafe in front of there. I think this is Dioria, or I think that's what that says. It's a newer cafe. You can see them coming out. You can see we're beginning to build. And what it is we opened State Street, and then we created this blank slate, and then people are coming, businesses are coming and coloring it, and it's evolving every single day, and every single weekend it seems like there's something new. Next slide. So we're walking through the evolution. This is down at the California. Now we didn't open State Street to people. It's still open for vehicles down there, but restaurants decided, well, we're gonna come out too. We want more space too, which is fine as long as there's pass by. We've been watching them closely down here as well. Next slide. We had a paving of Coda in the middle of this thing in the first week, so it was kind of interesting to have that paving project in the middle of the opening in the promenade. Next slide. This is Arigato. This is in the 1200 block, so we have the Good Lion, we have Molly's, a couple other restaurants coming out into the street, and you can see everyone's doing it a little bit different. Next slide. Now here's the 500 block, really getting to going. You can start to see everyone's kind of following the barriers. Sandbars spent a lot of money on their outside patio. And then you see the white fence in the foreground, that's Holdren's. They changed their fence. And then next slide, you see down the way on the west side of the street, this is Red Piano and O'Malley's. You can see them coming out. Now they started coming out a little far than they were allowed. So again, nimble, flexible. We go out and talk to them and say, hey, we might need to pull this back. Next slide, I think, shows them. Yes, this one shows them pulled back into a straight line, or this is actually before Institution Ale expanded theirs because they leased the parcel to the north of their parcel, and they expanded, and then we moved Red Piano over a bit. You see, you can barely make it out, but if you look in the upper right-hand side of your screen, there's a chandelier that was put up. I'm not too comfortable with that. We've asked that come down. But people are doing interesting things. We're trying to improve the lighting as we go too, because it's rather dark at night in these areas. Next slide. This is my favorite restaurant improvement. This is two hitching posts with sleeves and a table put on two hitching posts. So the hitching post is actually the support for the bar table. Very creative and interesting. And I want to give a shout out to the Bicycle Coalition, because the Bicycle Coalition saw like there's a lot of furniture that's being taken up, street furniture in the form of bike parking that's being taken up by restaurants. And so you'll see a number of, and I'm sorry I don't have a picture, a number of bike racks that they put out, these group bike racks, and one's right across the street from here, where so more bikes can lock up than before. And so thank you, Bicycle Coalition, for taking the initiative and doing that to provide. Now we're going to have more cycle bikes on parking on State Street, and we needed that. So thank you. Next slide. This is the parklet. I'm switching over to parklets now. This is our parklet guide. It's completely tailored to Santa Barbara style. That's a Santa Barbara street in the picture on the right, showing the dimensions of the parklet. It shows where you can do it, when you can do it, when you need to call us. My favorite part about the parklet guide approval process is follow the guidelines, take a picture, send it to outdoordining.santabarbaraca.gov, and you're approved. So this is the kind of thing that is pretty amazing. We have this approval process, and again, then they put stuff out, and we work with them. We're on the phone. We've got an email address that's outdoor dining specific, and there's 4 or 5 of us that are answering the public's questions. And I just got to say, the downtown parking staff who are a part of Transportation Division did such an amazing job at putting this guide together so quickly. Again, this guide changed. I think this is maybe the 8th or 9th iteration. We've walked with the accessibility committee. We walked with members on the street. We are identifying situations that need changes, and the business owners are happy to comply and love the fact that they have grace, and we believe in them, and we want to see them up and running, which is the point. Next slide. So parklets are in the parking lane. This was the first parklet. This is Savoy's parklet, first one we saw. And you can see the parked car beyond the parklet. So it's on the street, and it's a way of expanding the sidewalk into the street, into the parking lane specifically, so that they can get more space during the COVID phasing reopening and sell more goods and services. Next slide. Some people have done really good jobs of making them pretty and added plants and lights and the reflectivity, which I'll show you. Next slide. I think this one is that's right. This is Los Arroyos. This is right next to it. So you can see the different styles. You see the reflective material that they've placed on it. They did umbrellas. You can see that they have LED solar lighting for night, which is on the railing.
Wow.
Next slide. And then there's all sorts of regulations that they have to follow in terms of how you use the space. So we're watching how restaurateurs are doing that and ensuring that they're giving the right messages about their parklets and the rules regarding outdoor dining. Next slide. This is Milk and Honey on Anacapa. This is 0 West Block. Next slide. And you can see the reflective material that they're using. It's part of our requirements so that it can be seen, just like a parked car would have reflectivity on it. Next slide. Sometimes we get asked about the safety condition of parklets. We are by no means the first to do these. They're all over San Francisco, LA, New York. The parklet standard in San Francisco is pretty extensive. And so they're pretty proven, and that we just lifted the dimensions from those cities and designed them accordingly. I will say that the merchants themselves are responsible for the upkeep, the maintenance. It's a temporary device. It's not a permanent device. And they're responsible for providing ADA accessibility and for the liabilities of the parklet. This is all by the ordinance. So this is in front of Blue Owl. This is on Canna Perdita West 0 Block. Next slide. You saw that that one had the artificial turf, which is nice. This was actually one of the first ones. This is in front of Foxtail. And this one leans a bit. So it's interesting to be in this one to keep your drink on the table. Next slide. This is Chase Grill, and I think the Chase has changed just about every 3 or 4 days in the way they've been building. And so this was how they were the week before last. And next slide, this is how they are this week. They've completely enclosed it in, and we've accommodated a DG path through the landscape to access this. So again, flexible, nimble. We are allowing, if they use all LED lights, we are allowing them to use the plaza electricity to light these. The plaza electricity is photocell timed, so the lights automatically come on when it is dark, which is pretty nice. Next slide. This is the other side of the Chase Girl. So you see that it not only has the in the street, and this is State Street in this condition, so it's not technically a parklet, but you can see how the pedestrian way, there's 3 ways for a pedestrian to go up State Street. They can be on either sidewalk or up the middle. Next slide. This is Jill Shalhoub herself on her parklet. She spent a lot of time and energy on this one. It's very beautiful. It's got 1,000-pound planters at either end because it is on Anacapa, which is a little higher speed. So a little bit of extra protection just in case something is errant. Next slide. She has accommodated ADA as best she could, which we understand some people have stopped by from the committee and really appreciated this. And we're encouraging and asking for either ADA tables to be in the space if they have a lift, a step up, or providing a ramp such as this, which is a really elegant solution. Next slide. There also is a contractor, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting the name, who actually awarded 3 people gratis parklet construction, and this is one of them. I'm forgetting the name of the winery, but this is on, sorry, Jill was on Santa Barbara Street. This is Anacapa Street. And you see the K-rail, which we're going to have moved at an angle if it hasn't been already to deflect cars. That K-rail is filled with water and is extremely heavy. And then next slide, you can see how they've handled the ADA issues with a very gradual ramp, very wide. And then of course they'll be adding more to it. It's not quite finished yet. Next slide. This is in front of Little Kitchen next to Wildcat. Next slide. That's on Ortega. This is also on Ortega. This is on the east side. This is in front of the press room. This was one that was gifted by the contractor. It's got internal benches that are built into it. Next slide. And just more on State Street, what the various accoutrements and style that they're doing. Again, it's changing, shifting almost every day. We spend a lot of time on the weekend watching this. Next slide. Watching what's happening, monitoring it. Now, interesting, the 1300 block. So this is the Parks and Recreation bus. This bus is at the corner of Sola and State. The bus is there specifically in case an errant driver comes down, that it doesn't get on the street at speed. We don't have to do that at the mid blocks because you can't get up to speed at right angles. The members of this block don't like the bus, so we're going to replace the bus. And then this street has gotten less attention, or sorry, it's gotten attention, but it's less use in the street. And then we also have parking on this side of street. This section of State Street between Victoria and Sola actually has on-street parking. So we have to balance the needs of the merchants who want the parking back and want the access back with the restaurateurs, which are Jane, Opal, and Carlitos. And so those 3 restaurants have built parklets. You can see Carlitos, their parklet there on the left side. And so we're working with them on an alternative, something like a half opening, probably not a total opening, but something like a half opening where cars can be on the street mixed with pedestrians and bikes and have a little bit more parking. Very slow street. Next slide. We've had all sorts of musicians pop up. Amplified music is not allowed. Busking is, I think it's technically not allowed, but we've seen this. Some of it's appropriate. Some of it is less, or, it just depends on your taste. This was just a wonderful thing going on 2 Saturdays ago in the 600 block. Next slide. And this was this week during the Tuesday market down in the 500 block. Next slide. So the biggest deal, the biggest challenge that I would say we have had, well, there's 2. There's the lack of wearing masks, but the other one is cyclists. Cyclists have been the challenge. So you have a couple different camps. You have the cyclists saying that they want the pedestrians off the street, and then you have pedestrians say that they want the cyclists off the street. And then probably the majority of the people think that the folks doing the wheelies, which there's a really neat club of kids who are out there, doing good things, but they're doing wheelies, and the wheelies are a little bit much for some people. And we have had one person hit in the 500 block with someone doing a wheelie in the crowd. So we've wanted to monitor that. It's very challenging, this issue, as we've talked to council about it, because State Street is the backbone of the bicycle system. It is the spine, as you know from the bicycle master plan. And so that's the place cyclists are, and there's no good alternatives for cyclists to be elsewhere. Next slide. So when you think about downtown and going downtown, this is the place cyclists want to be. And here's the other thing about Vision Zero is we've taken the street that you're most likely to get hurt on a bicycle, arguably the street that is not the safest because of the sheer bicycle volumes on State Street, but all the things that are happening, most of the side swipes, you're most likely to go down on a bike on State Street, unfortunately. We have taken this street from the least safest to the most safest street in this pedestrian opening promenade. So cyclists want to be there. And then the other thing is they represent a large population of the activity. In other words, we've created this new activity on State Street, and the cyclists are a big part of that success. So if we take away the cyclists, many of us are questioning, will it be as successful? Will the activity be as grand as it is now? Next slide. So that's something we started wrestling with. And the other thing to tell the committee, which is really fascinating, is the COVID experience has created a renaissance for bicycling. Bike shops are empty. There's very little inventory. It's kind of like, and it's at all areas of the spectrums, but it's with the kids. And it's like mom and dad finally said, hey, I'm alone with my kid. I've always wanted to teach him how to ride a bike. I'm going to go get a bike. And then they taught him how to ride. And now they're all showing up on State Street. These kids are all showing up on State Street. Next slide. So you have these families with these young kids, and some of them are really young. Let's go to the next slide. I think I have another picture of some kids. Actually, this is the owner of a Service Master. His daughter is up ahead, impatiently waiting for him. They've been bicycling for the first time on State Street. For the first time, they're bicycling. And here they are on State Street, just loving it. And the girl is 12, just loves the experience. Next slide. So you have all these families who are out there on the street, and so you've got this renaissance going on. And what we think is happening with State Street is really people are treating it kind of like they would a park. It's kind of like it's the place to be, not just because you want to go shop or you want to eat, but it's the place you want to experience Santa Barbara now. And I think that's the big lesson that we've learned in Shift that's creating this, what we would call this success. Next slide. But we have had to make adjustments because we've tried to control speed, because there are some people who are going faster. Next slide. So we put out some signs. I think I've got some signs in here. So here's one of our signs. Hard to see it. Maybe the next slide we get closer. I think we do. Yeah, so cyclists must ride with courtesy and caution. We've got the no wheelie sign. We've got a 5 mile an hour speed limit here. And these are running up and down the street. Next slide. And then also, the members of the community and the Bicycle Coalition team. So what we've done is, instead of just saying, hey, let's have the police come out and enforce everybody, we really gave the challenge to the Bicycle Coalition and Coast, and we said, hey, look, council's getting these complaints about the mix of bikes and peds not being good. What can you do? So they have been so amazing, coming out to the street, talking with the cycle groups, the wheelie folks, talking on the big bike rides, night moves. And they've come up with this dismount zone sign, which is actually working pretty well. Signs, most people ignore signs. This sign is actually working pretty well. Had dinner about 4 times now in the zone since the sign went up, and watching it very carefully. There are people who aren't obeying it, but a lot of people are getting off their bikes through the zone, which is very, very nice behavior to see. Next slide. The mask issue, I just had to take this picture of gentleman couldn't get into Yogurtland without a mask, so he used his, I think that's his vehicle tag from his auto service. Anyway, masks are a big issue. People are not wearing masks. Fortunately, the governor has said they're mandatory now. And next slide. So we adjusted the signage in the right of way, and that sign, when you get a little closer to it, says facial coverings required in red. It also has share the street on it on the lower section with distancing and bikes and kids. And so we really asked people to share the street, and it seems to be going better. The ambassadors are out there monitoring and educating people for masks. The mayor was actually out on the street today educating people about masks and wearing them on the street, which is required. So it's kind of like whoever's watching, we want to see you wearing your masks out on State Street. Next slide. And then finally, some observations that I would, just some takeaways for us as we see this evolution, particularly in the 500 block. When you walk down this block, when you walk down this before and all these people that you see now were in restaurants having dinner, you didn't see who they were. You could be walking by friends and not even know that they're there. But what's amazing about this is you walk down or you sit here, you see Santa Barbans you know. And perhaps there's nothing more special or makes you feel more local or connected to Santa Barbara than actually running into your friends on the street without appointment, without scheduling. You just run into them and you say hi and you have an unscheduled encounter in friendship. And go to the next slide. I see that happening on the street, and it's something that we haven't seen on State Street, and it's creating this real local feel for how people engage in the street. And we have a feeling that is part of the recipe of its success as we move forward in this. I'll just tell you that there's already talk about how to do it permanent. The staff is highly engaged in conversations about what it would take, what would be the parameters of it. We also caution people that this is the summertime, this is the high season. What would the experience be in the wintertime when things slow down? Would it be as powerful? And then we also think that the land use and the things that are going through with the Planning Commission and the council that are coming up with the AUD in changing the densities in this area to increase housing and the living population that would use the street as a living room are also key to the future success of any permanent consideration. So with that, we just leave it on this slide and happy to answer any questions about the evolution of State Street and parklets.
Well, Rob, this is just absolutely fabulous and amazing. And especially the newer members of the committee. I don't know that I've lived in Santa Barbara almost 50 years and watched State Street go from the diagonal parking in front of Trenwith's and Hunt's China Store, and all those stores are long gone. And to come to this I'm very, very excited about the future. All right, let's open it up for public comment, or which should we do first? Committee questions? Committee questions before we do public comment? Any committee questions? Okay, Michelle, I guess we can go to public comment.
Oh, sorry, I
did you
have a
want-
question.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, this is related, but I think important. And thank you, Rob, for this presentation and all of your staff and yourself for your work on this project. I also think it's really incredible to see, and having been down there myself, I've really enjoyed watching it. I'm sure many of us saw the LA Times article that was published about this, about the street closure. And as we discuss this, I think it's important to keep in mind that there's two things going on simultaneously. We're finally delivering on a community vision that I think a lot of people share for what State Street and what our downtown corridor can look like. But we're also in the midst of a global pandemic and a health crisis that is really alarming. And I was just wondering if we could speak, if you could speak a little bit to maybe the role that that public health is playing in this. I know that they put out specific guidelines to protect health for individuals and for people, both the restaurant workers and our service industry, and also all of the people that are coming out to use this space. And so in particular, the LA Times article was really, I believe, focused on the masks. And then since then, the LA Times published its own data about the County of LA and their own outdoor dining program, I think it's the Alfresco program, observing that a number of restaurants were not following LA County health guidelines. And so when I read that, I couldn't help but think about locally, what is compliance looking like, and how is the city working with the health department to make sure that while we're innovating and trying new things on the street, we're also still protecting the health of our service workers and our visitors. Thank you.
Great question. So Madam Chair, Committee Member Sanford, yeah, so what we're doing is, and I think the governor's really helped us out by mandating that you wear a mask in public. I think that that was a huge, needed step, because now there's no ambiguity about whether you should have a mask in public or not. And so we changed the signs. I think we had them changed in, the next day, on Tuesday, after the governor made the announcement on late Friday, and we've got them required. We've got people out, the ambassadors saying, hey, where's your mask? That they're required, and, please be respectful. You're wearing your mask to protect other people. And so it's really important to understand that it's not necessarily just for you, it's to protect other people in case you have the virus. And then we'll also mention, you can take off your mask when you're seated. You see the people seated in the restaurants don't have masks on, but it's also very polite when your waiter comes to serve you to have your mask on to protect them too. So because those service workers are being put at risk by continuing to work with a larger population and exposure potential. So that's what we're doing. We have Jason Harris, our economic development manager, and we have Nina Johnson, assistant to the city administrator, and a highly engaged staff with the county health in getting up-to-date regulations and then pushing them out and forward. I'll also say that the Downtown Santa Barbara organization with Robin Elander as the new interim director has been outstanding to work with and to get information out from all ends. And really what you're seeing is the lesson here is that we just an amazing team. I mean, those signs that were put up, the dismount signs, that was individuals in the Bicycle Coalition saying, hey, we need to do something with the city. City's like, okay, blessing, you're blessed, do it. That looks great, do it. Let's come together a community and make this work, and let's do it safely. And I think the safe part that you bring up, Community Member Sanford, is so critical, and I think it's beginning to resonate, and we're seeing more compliance on the masks. Not as much as we want, but a lot more than we saw at the beginning.
Cool. Other comments? Have we lost people? Hope not. I had one small comment. When you mentioned New York City, I've been lucky enough to have kids live there, so I spend a fair amount of time there. I see Hillary, I'll be right with you. I think that city had some brilliant designing, many years ago, because the big boulevards were designed with huge sidewalks. So they don't have to go into the street. Amsterdam, Broadway, any of the major streets going up and down Manhattan Island have huge sidewalks so that you can have your restaurant and a very nice outdoor sitting area. And then there's plenty of sidewalk for people to go by. So now that you're pointing out how people are running into other people here in Santa Barbara, that's one of the reasons New York has that neighborhood feeling. And it didn't occur to me until going through all this that, yeah, a lot of them are outside and they don't have to be juggling the cars and the bikes and the people, because the boulevard, the sidewalks originally were designed, 100 years ago or more as super wide. So that's just a comment I wanted to make. And Hillary would like to make a comment or a question, not sure which. Ms. Blackerby?
I'll wait till public comment.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, not hearing anything. Michelle, it's time for public comment.
And Madam Chair, I just want to acknowledge, so we have Ken Epperson who's on the line, and we said that, so he's going to be speaking during public comment, but what we did that's kind of interesting, and we kind of put our heads together, how could we make public comment on this a little bit more rich for the TCC, because how many people are going to come on a Thursday night and talk about Safe Street? So Kent went out on the street and interviewed people, and he's got 12 minutes of public comment brought to you. And so we're going to cue him up, and you're going to hear the plethora of comments from State Street piped right to us from the street. So public comment's never going to be so good, I hope.
And if we have any others in addition to his 12 minutes, we won't forget them, right? We have some people who patiently waited.
That's correct.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We do have two people who have raised their hand at this time. Given that introduction, I will go ahead and start with Kent. And go ahead, Kent.
Hi, Madam Chair and members of the Transportation Circulation Committee. I'm overjoyed. I can't tell you how excited I've been over the last couple months working very closely with the State Street closure. And I run the Traffic Solutions Program at SB CAG, and have been doing open streets initiatives throughout the county. And so this is pretty much a dream come true for me. But I did go out and interviewed about, I would say, 30 or so people over the weekend and a couple weekdays as well. And unfortunately, we tried to show the video through screen sharing, and it's just so choppy that it's really better to just do the audio. But I wanted to let you know that I will be uploading this to a site, and then I can share the video with you as well, so you can see the faces with the voices. But I'd like to go ahead and jump into this. I want to say that I asked basically 3 questions. One was what brought them down to State Street. The next was, what they thought of the State Street temporary closure. And then the third was I asked them if they thought there was anything that we could do to improve it, or any feedback that they could give us to make it even better. So I'll go ahead and start this, and please let me know if the sound is not good, and I'll adjust it.
Based on a need, out of a crisis, came the most beautiful, creative thing. It's now going to set our spirits on fire again. Everyone's talking about it. Good job, Santa Barbara. We love you.
Not only is it great to be able to walk around and bike around without having anyone hitting us in a vehicle, but also, with all that's been going on and people needing social distancing, for restaurants to be able to expand their tables out into the streets, it's awesome.
I'll just say this State Street being this way, it's fantastic. It just completely changes the vibe, especially in Lower State. It's just exploded. It's almost like we're in a different city, but like everybody's having fun, and thank God people are getting back out into the world. So this is fantastic.
I'm not that comfortable with cars going past, but this beautiful, and everybody I've met has hoped that they leave it like this. And I also think that this should just stay pedestrian only forever.
Riding the bike in an open space was just a great
Treat.
just such a treat. Just really cruising safely and slowly, but being able to really have the full street to ride in was just delightful. And people seem to kind of get it that we're all kind of moving at the same pace, and bikes can work.
Everybody was respectful. It felt more respectful. Like we slowed down, people on the big bikes. And
When I first moved here from Chicago, you could park on State Street, and people were very, very upset about that. And that came to pass, and things went better. So sometimes it's just difficult to deal with change. But I think that if we embrace this change, it'll make the community so much more beautiful, and everyone will be more successful and more.
Because I would come down here all the time, and there used to be busy streets all the time. It wasn't. I get to experience it more. I feel like it's more like a community.
No, he was just actually noticing some of the chalk work about like diversity and all that. And opened up a really nice opportunity to talk with them.
It's more fun to be able to walk State Street and take your time and look around. And like Santa Monica has the promenade, and other places have done the same thing. It's nice, it's conducive. Since I'm a musician, it'd be nice to have a little music group down here play, encourage the arts. And they do the street painting and have some music and have groups coming.
We love what we see down here. I've never seen State Street so energized, and amidst the pandemic of all things.
We usually come a couple times a week, and we've been, we're trying to eat it at as many of these restaurants as we can.
So we'd like to have the city allow more musicians as they do at farmers markets.
And we hope that it'll stay open permanently.
So we've been open for about a week now. Things are different. Things are weird. Some people seem to go by their own rules and other people don't. And it's interesting, to say the least. Being someone who's worked at multiple bars on State Street for many years, it is something that has probably needed to happen. It's visually great to see people thriving and walking and breathing life and stimulating the economy. There's no other reason to drive down State Street other than to look at other people. But I think this should be a permanent solution.
Very European feeling.
Yeah, like everyone's getting together and everyone is feeding off the same energy. Even they were just saying we wanted to get drinks here, the restaurants will bring us food here.
Businesses are kind of working together and making it an experience.
Everyone's very respectful, especially when you're walking down State Street. Everyone maintains their space with each other.
Actually, every business owner here are trying to follow the guidelines of the health department as best they can. There's 15 pages to follow. What is encouraging is everybody's patio is unique. Everybody's patio is vibrant. It seems like there's some energy that wasn't there before. It seems like what we have are stable businesses now, and people are working with each other, not against each other. I haven't heard one negative thing from the customers. They love that it's a pedestrian walkway. They love the outdoor patios. We're in Santa Barbara. You just don't need the vehicles here. You have bikers, you have skateboarders, you have people walking, and you have joggers. But I think the more we look at this, we're probably going to have to put something in place that separates people on wheels and people in sneakers.
You know, if they see somebody, everybody moves their 6 feet or they move away. It seems like everybody has a mask on and they're respecting everybody. You gotta keep it this way because that way you don't have no hot rods around here.
I like that about Santa Barbara. It's a good idea. Hopefully they can block Cannon Bernardino, Dakota, no cars, and have it more bicycle friendly. That'd be nice. Overall, I think it's working, but there's a few rotten eggs, but it kind of goes without saying.
Issues come up, such as bicyclists, the
pedestrians walking from one side of the street to the other without looking for the cyclist. We saw a youngster doing a wheelie through the dismount zone over here. He ran into a lady. Guy grabbed him. There was a scuffle. Looked like he was a minor. Looked like the guy who grabbed him was an adult. And myself and many other cruiser club members of town were contacted to help kind of curb it a little bit. I think we did a pretty good job. We were able to speak to my generation, next generation down, going down to about the 16, 17-year-olds.
And I own the tribal routes for many years. And we love this street to be closed on the street. It's more fun and people walking. This is a great idea. I would like to keep it like the way it is forever because we've seen enough cars, you know. This is great.
Well, we're local. We live here in town, but I think it's an awesome concept.
I think it's good, you know, because cars used to go one way, but the other cars, but like you have to go to another way. But the good thing is that you get to ride your bike more.
And they have seating in the back, and I'm like, I don't want to face the parking lot. I like seeing the street, the people, the dogs, the kids. It's great. So I dig it a lot. I really like it. I feel like this should be permanent.
I think it's cool because you get to be outside more. During the quarantine, we're not really outside, we're like going on walks and things, but we're not like outside on patios and like sitting at restaurants really. So I think this is great, especially during the quarantine.
Well, there's a lot of, I noticed a lot of young bikers now that don't respect, the laws of the road, and they're just little wild kids. But other than that, I sit out here and I see the dismount sign, and some people obey by it, and a lot of people don't. But somebody out here to, regulate a little bit, just have some people just don't get too wild. I noticed the transits and stuff, they're not too much out here.
More like an experience, like you'd go here and like without the cars here, it feels more like you're in a place, like you're walking around. It's safer, like more escapism than just like a street.
As far as shutting down State Street, I'm all for it. I think it's great. I do think they need to make some improvements though. First off, they should shut down the sidewalk, allow sidewalk only in the street side. That should be the sidewalk, not that. They should put up the no smoking signs they took down when they painted the poles. They need to regulate the bikes. These kids come through here really crazily.
And adults as well.
And adults. I think it's the right move. I like it a lot. Should be permanent.
It gets pretty crowded because we ride our bikes down through this way, and it gets really crowded, really hard to go around the people. So maybe, I don't know, I honestly don't really like how they close it down. It just gets really crowded sometimes. And then people are crossing, like, they don't stop at the stoplights and they just cross, like the people. And it makes it hard for cars passing by to get through. More people are coming out. It used to be pretty lonely, so I think they like it. Yeah. So I think that's a good thing for the city. They're making more money, I guess, business down here.
And I just love the setup where in this main area, there's a lot of businesses. I love how they put the signage. It's making things really clear.
We're seeing a lot of customers and locals saying, "Oh, this is great. We've been waiting in Santa Barbara for something like this for years, and it is great that now it's happening, and they hope it stays like this." The only thing that it needs to be improved, and it got better since the city got the signs on the street, is how to deal with pedestrians and bikes on the State Street. Because State Street is a major lane for bikes to go up and down, and that needs to continue, because otherwise you don't have, like you have to go to Bath Street or go down in Anacapa, and those places don't have bike paths, or it's not the same thing.
Yeah, we're just getting our patio together right now, and I think it's a great addition to Santa Barbara. Every bar has really put their effort in, along with this bar. Spent a lot of money to try and make a nice patio and make Santa Barbara, this is the center of Santa Barbara, make it look nice again, get people back on State Street again. I haven't heard one person complain like what we've done here. Well, I don't know what all the other bars have done, but they love the fact they can sit out on State Street and have a drink or have some food, and it's kind of like you can't park actually on this part of State Street. So for me, I don't know, I think it's kind of pointless opening it back up again for traffic.
I love Farmers Market Tuesdays, and I'm so very, very happy to see it expanded an additional 2 blocks. And it's so nice to see the Makers Market happening on Tuesdays in De La Guerra Plaza. And I'm hoping this is going to continue for a long time to come.
So I'm happy to come to the farmers market, which is just such a pleasure. And I love how organically the market has spread up State Street and split, where there are these parklet and business patios. This type of promenade is something that people have been dreaming about for so long. Not only is this matching the need of the businesses to have outdoor space to safely serve customers, but it's also matching a need that this city has had for a long time to reinvent itself.
The Third Street Promenade, Santa Monica, as a prototype to show what it could be. But what did Pablo Picasso say? Anything in the world you can imagine becomes reality. So I guess enough of us imagine this, and I guess with the pandemic maybe helped. But my God, we have to have a shout out to the Santa Barbara City Council to finally create this. And I think it's a miracle, and we really can, if we really put our minds to it, change the world.
All right, well, that concludes that. And I just wanted to preface this by saying that I did not edit this to advance my own interest and agenda here. I really, I reflected exactly what people were saying, tried to cut it down as much as I could. But this really is a very good cross section. I talked to many business owners, many locals, tourists, kids, a whole wide range of people on State Street. So thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate it. And I will be sharing this in video form very soon.
And Madam Chair, I just wanted to thank Ken Epperson for doing that work. It's really great to have public comment come to you right from the street that you're looking at. So, and I think we have one more commenter, if Ms. Bedard has that person.
1 or 2, yeah.
Yes, Madam Chair, there is one additional person with their hand raised, and I will go ahead and unmute them. And Mr. Remus, you have 2 minutes. You may go ahead.
Let me guess, it's Barry Remus.
Guess who?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I hope you'll forgive me if I happen to eke past 2 minutes. We also want to thank Ken Epperson from Traffic Solutions. That was a wonderful montage of on the street testimonial, and it's great to hear. I don't think anyone here needs to be sold on the benefits of what we're seeing here on State Street. As you probably know, Coast and our partners at SB Bike and Traffic Solutions, many of us have been advocating for this realization for years. As I say to a lot of people, it's unfortunate that it took a virus and a pandemic to get us here. However, it's just fantastic to see. So what I'd like to do is two things. We've also been very pleased to have been involved with and thank the city and staff for soliciting our input. We've been helping with the signage, and also thanks to Dennis Allen, who is the contractor that provided free construction on some of the parklets. The parklets are wonderfully creative, and we've been seeing those. What I'd like to do is to do 2 things. One is, again, I'm a stickler for this, really want to help people to see that what we've done is open State Street to people. And that's what it's really about here, is people connecting, whether you want to call it a European fashion or not, but it's however you slice it, it's still Santa Barbara style, and it will become that. It's a work in progress. It's getting better, and it will continue to get better as we find the best ways to find harmony with pedestrians and cyclists. I know that we have full faith in the city's transportation staff to be able to find that balance and find that harmony. We've been very excited and happy and pleased, as personally I have been, to be out there helping to educate our State Street experiencers, our participants, in pointing out the new dismount zone. I think that what we'd really like to do is to look forward and try to put our thinking caps on, all of you, to think about what are the ways that we really can hope to keep this permanent on State Street throughout the development, the future development, whether it's housing and mixed use, et cetera, to really see that we can maintain something like this And down the road, if this does become permanent, as we hope, we really would like to see that the dismount zones may hopefully have to go away, to find a good way to be able to manage and properly circulate in a safe way, but both bicyclists, skateboarders, and pedestrians on State Street, as it really becomes a people-focused downtown hub for Santa Barbara. Thanks so much. Have a great night.
Thank you, Barry, as always. Wow.
Okay,
Question?
Madam Chair, there's no other public speakers, so it's back to the committee.
Okay. Would any committee members like to make any comments at this time? Andres?
Hi, good evening. Just good general question. So this is scheduled to be open through Labor Day weekend. And then I'm sure there's gonna be quite a bit of public comment, and just curious what's on the schedule to retrieve that comment and just understand kind of the experiment that's taking place, and as regards to planning for the future. Is there anything tentatively planned that would to follow up on this?
Right.
That's purely my question.
Yeah.
So maybe a question for Mr. Dayton.
Right, we're looking to Rob.
Sorry, so the particular question is about follow-up. How do we do the process? And, I think
What do we do when Labor Day happens?
Yeah, because Labor Day is the ordinance ends. Council can extend the ordinance. In working with Jason Harris, who's the Economic Development Manager, he's been working with the council to talk about, what do we do, and working with the team over here in Public Works. One of the questions that I mentioned before that I think we really want to understand is, what is the activity in the wintertime? Now the weather's great and the outdoor dining works great. And then when the inclement weather comes and it gets a little cooler, how, does it work still? Is it still treated like a park? One option is we just extend what's happening now into the winter and see that happen. The other thing that might happen, and there's been discussions of, is how do you move forward if the community was to say, and the council said, make this permanent, how do you do that? Right now you have a street, the standard State Street Plaza design, which is 2 lanes with right turn pockets on either end of the intersections. How do you use the space? How do you make it better or easier to separate cyclists from, say, walkers? How do you formalize the space for restaurants and other businesses to utilize it? So these are the questions that are coming up. The council has is forming a kind of a task force for looking at downtown and what to do and to guide us. And I think we're going to be seeing that formalized more and having more discussions about that. But it's really not formalized completely yet. And we're talking about it. And what's amazing to me is we're only 5 weeks from when we started this. I can't even believe it. Like when I said, is it really 5 weeks? I feel like it's been 2 or 3 months because we were working so hard. It's like, fix this, go out to the street, talk to them. So it's a great question. And we'll just have to see what the tenor is. There's, like you heard on the public comment, so grateful that Ken did that. A lot of people want to see it remain open.
Right, lots of folks are staying tuned to this one.
It's true. Any other? Thank you. Let's see, I see Eve Sanford's smiling face. Would you like to chat, talk?
Yeah, I just wanted to, thanks. I wanted to provide a few comments. First, I really would like to thank just all the staff for their work on this. Rob, it sounds like you guys have been super busy and attentive to this project, and it's paying off in that it seems to be working really well, and I'm really happy to see that. I also want to thank Coast and the Santa Barbara Bike Coalition and all of the individuals who are helping to come out and contribute to making this project successful. It's really heartwarming. It's a great partnership. between the city and the business community and some of our community organizations to ultimately create something that's really beautiful for our city. And in that, I think it's very keeping in the vision. I think it's very keeping in the vision that Pearl Chase had for our community. I've actually been in quarantine doing a bit of reading about her legacy and her work for the city. And I find it really fascinating that while we oftentimes use her attention to aesthetic and her vision for a beautiful Santa Barbara as a reason to be slow or cautious about doing things, another part of her that I think we don't, a part of her work that we don't focus on enough is the fact that she was a civic leader and a citizen who worked diligently to change our city for the better, and did that work not as a city staffer, but as an individual. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind as we work with our business owners, that citizens in Santa Barbara are uniquely positioned to be able to change our city for the better and make it a beautiful, more livable space. With that, I just want to give a few comments. I'll just move through them. First of all, I think that just starting sort of higher level, the flexibility of this project is really beautiful and extra satisfying to see in Santa Barbara. I generally support this approach of piloting things. It's obviously been documented a lot in transportation planning, but oftentimes it's piloting and trying things is just the best approach for quickly learning and being able to change. You know, there's a time for studying things, but there's also a time for trying new things and seeing what the outcome is. And I'm glad to see us taking this approach on State Street. I almost asked this as a question, but I'll just put it out there as a comment. But I'm pretty interested in seeing these types of parklets happen in other parts of the city. And I would be curious if we've had business owners on the east side or on the west side voice their support or interest in putting a parklet on their street themselves. Having worked on the parklet program at the City of LA and the Department of Transportation there, I do know that one of the big concerns was always what would happen if a driver or a car driver were to drive into it. So I'm going to assume that's part of the issue, but I would support exploring ways to bring the rest of our community into this. That way it's not just concentrated on State Street, but, you know, business owners in other parts of the city. And I actually went to the Llama Dog Parklet last Friday after a group rollerblading session. And so I saw that it's already kind of in the funk zone, but can't help but think about businesses on Milpas and on San Andres Street that would really benefit from this. I want to comment on the cycling access. I do know that there have been concerns around whether or not people riding bikes are behaving well and if they're posing a safety issue to the people that are walking on the street. I want to highlight that something that's been going on in our community in the midst of coronavirus is that a lot of people are using their bikes for the first time in a long time. And that's been documented. Like Trek did a really interesting survey and you can go check that out. But you know, there are a few bike companies and researchers that are looking at how people's travel habits and exercise habits are changing in coronavirus. And overall, it's showing that biking is increasing. People are, you know, bike shops are sold out all over the city. I have a friend who works at Bicycle Bob's and they've been nonstop busy. And that's really exciting to see. And I see that, I want to say that there's a way that this project ties into that, in that we're seeing people bike to State Street as a destination, which frees up parking for other people who need to drive and can't ride their bike. And I think part of supporting that would be finding a way to create harmony on the street and support people biking on the street, and not banning them. So I would say that I'm in support of finding a way to keep people, to provide access for people to bike on the street. And at the same time, I have observed myself some bikers riding through. That was before we put in the dismount zones, and those seem to be working really well. As someone who's worked in the cycling space for almost a decade, I just want to say that a lot of times when something is new, people are still feeling it out. And so I guess I would ask that the city be patient in waiting to observe how this project plays out with riders as they're new and they're experiencing it. And ultimately, I think the novelty of maybe going down there and doing wheelies is just going to wear off as it becomes part of our city and something that people are more used to. right now is kind of a shiny new toy, and I think it draws people into riding it and exploring it and feeling it out. But I think that over time, what often happens with spaces that are primarily filled with pedestrians is that people will tend to avoid them because they know that they just can't get through there as fast or as nimble as they want to. And at the same time, I want to make sure that the families that are biking into State Street to visit our businesses can comfortably do that, because the whole length of State Street can be quite a long walk. If you're talking about going all the way from like Victoria down to the waterfront. And so I think it's important that people have that safe bicycle access. And again, I think that with time, we might observe that some of the sort of more, fast-paced bicyclists kind of lose the lure of being down there. And then lastly, I just really want to say, touching on the coronavirus epidemic that we're having, and the fact that this project is happening in that context, I'm happy to see the signage encouraging or now telling people that they're required to wear masks. I have friends in the service industry, one in particular who manages a restaurant on State Street, and myself have worked in the service industry, and I know that it can be quite a challenging power imbalance between the people serving you your food and the customer, because the customer is right, but the customer may not be right when they're not wearing their mask. And so even though Governor Newsom is telling people to wear their mask, I'm not sure if that message is always making it down to the individual. So I think that whatever we can do to support that without putting that burden on the service workers themselves is really important. And I think if anyone is listening at home or anyone is just thinking about it, it's really important to tip your server extra well in these times, because they're creating an experience for you. And we just heard all that awesome comment from Kent Epperson, which I really appreciate, of people just showing how excited they are to be down on State Street. But they're creating that experience for you at a risk to their own health. And so it's really important that we just acknowledge the fact that this entire project this experiment that we're undertaking in downtown Santa Barbara isn't done in a silo, and it's everyone contributing to it. And our service workers who are serving the food and creating the experience for customers are really doing quite a lot and taking on a health risk and a health burden. And so that might be beyond what we're here to talk about right now when we're looking at parklets and bollards and things like that, but it's definitely top of mind for me. And I would just say thank you to all of those individuals that are down there and working right now. And so, again, I'll just close lastly by saying that the parklets are perhaps like the thing about this project that I find the most interesting and exciting. And I would definitely support long-term seeing both the closure and the parklets stay around. And I'm open to supporting the city of Santa Barbara as we research that and talk with our community about the future of this project. And I would also be pretty interested in seeing what paths lay forward in terms of spreading this parklet program throughout the city. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Eve.
So, Madam Chair, just really quick, and I'm sorry I didn't have any other pictures, but the parklet program, community member Sanford, is citywide, so that's really exciting. And we have parklets on the Mesa, we have parklets on the west side on San Andres, we have parklets on Coast Village Road. I'm just trying to, I'm not sure we have them on the east side yet. There probably is one I don't know of. But yes, the program is citywide. So the guidelines say anywhere there is a parking lane and there's a sieve that you have to go through that tells you which locations are okay and based on the parking restrictions. But yes, citywide. So thank you for that comment.
Amazing. Ms. Blackerby.
So one question for Rob about the parklets. I know the State Street thing that has sort of a sunset as of now, Labor Day weekend. Are the parklets, the like non-State Street parklets, do those have a sunset?
They do. The entire ordinance, as it's written now, it will sunset on that date. And I'm already hearing people talking about extending it, but that conversation hasn't happened. We can't prejudge that, but I think your guess is as good as mine. It feels like the momentum is going.
Yeah. For me, my favorite part is the side street parklets. Seeing those, I think that's something I've wanted to see for a really long time. And I feel like it's more kind of, I don't know, sort of distributes people a little better on those side streets and gives, I know a lot of our side street businesses have really struggled over the years to get people down their way. So that's really good. You know, it's really bittersweet for me, right? It's a real shame that it took a pandemic to do this, because it's something that I've wanted to see for so long. There, you know, aspects of it, some kind of more pedestrian friendly State Street. And I did take a walk on a weekday to not be down there on a weekend last week, and for the first time. And it, you know, I think it was the first day that the statewide mask or face covering mandate was there. People were doing okay. But for me, it's bittersweet because I'm definitely not ready to go eat physically in a restaurant or be at a bar. And I know a lot of people that are feeling that as well. For a lot of the reasons Ms. Stanford mentioned about not wanting to. I'm often an early adopter, but I really just can't do it in this way. And I want to sort of unburden some of those workers who I know are feeling very nervous while people are still learning the rules. But I do hope that as we hopefully move through this pandemic and it's safer to be out in public and to gather, that there is an aspect of this that stays, so that people like me who are just kind of nervous about it, or people who do have compromised immune systems or who are older, right, who are more at risk, that they'll get to experience this someday as well, safely. So we'll see how it goes. I'm glad that there's a constant iteration happening on this. And I would just encourage people that if they're really want to get downtown and drink a beer or have a dinner, that there's free testing so that you can find out that you're hopefully not a asymptomatic super spreader of this this virus. It's really easy, and like I said, it's free. So I encourage anyone listening to go get tested and know your status, so that you can enjoy it with a clean conscience. And thanks to the staff throughout all the different departments that have made this work.
Any other comments at this time? Well, we've had a long meeting, primarily because we had to miss one, and it's been very, very informative. And I do have a couple of closing comments, and I will do my best. I will be brief because I know everybody's very tired, and thank you for your attention. I'm fascinated, having been on this committee for a long time, I think 8 years now. We have had long discussions at times about removing parking. I remember the bike corral in front of the Sojourner restaurant and the anxiety over removing parking places. We've had numerous discussions about how many parking places can we take away and how many will we be leaving. And so I'm just making a comment that I'm fascinated how during the current situation, the vendors and the truck drivers have been able to make deliveries to these restaurants. The loading zones in the front are gone, and now there are parklets on the side streets. So as I'm listening to all this, I'm going, wow, the parking in front is gone for the truckers. The parking on the side is gone for people who want to not have to pay in the parking lot. And yet it seems as if it's going amazingly well. So that's just a comment. And maybe that'll change over time. And as far as others have expressed the concern that it's too bad that this has happened during a pandemic. I would only want to mention, and I loved it when Eve Sanford brought up Miss Chase. We must remember that beautiful Santa Barbara only came about because of a terrible earthquake. If we hadn't had the earthquake, we wouldn't have had the reconstruction of our now landmark downtown. The creation of the Architectural Review Board was compliments of Pearl Chase and Thomas Stork. And it only happened after a serious crisis. So we are using a crisis now in the same manner. And lastly, you talked about it maybe ending at Labor Day, but we all know that the weather is really good here year round. And I do follow the University of Washington epidemiological website, healthdata.org, I think it is. Very, very, very good website. And unfortunately, it looks like we're going to be in a second wave of virus in California. There's no plan for us to have, there's no optimism that we're going to reduce the number of our cases. So I'm predicting that in October, someone my age for sure is going to be a lot happier sitting in a parka outside than definitely going into a heated restaurant. I won't be doing that to have a dinner if the pandemic continues as I kind of expect it will. So we'll see how it evolves, but I think for a lot of reasons, it's going to go past Labor Day. So thank you for listening to me, and thank you all for all of your time. And I'll turn it back over to Michelle or Rob for final words.
Well, yeah, I just want to thank, I want to just have Jessica pop on her screen and say hi. And then also Michelle one more time, and just, they're here doing, so there's Jessica Grant. She's involved on all these projects, and they're just awesome staff members. And
awesome. I've got one more kudos. I forgot. You sent out to the committee. I just want to shout out that we got third best city for bikes by the People for Bikes in the whole United States. Third best city for bikes for 2020. I thought that was pretty awesome. You put out a media release, but I wanted to make sure we mentioned it at this meeting. That's terrific.
And we were 12th last year. So this team, this transportation team, planning team we have, and it's not everybody's here tonight. We gave Derek Bailey the night off. Just a phenomenal job. And just to say it, the active transportation planning grants, Jessica and Derek are working very hard with engineering team little assistance, and they're going to be submitting those in September with a whole lot of $1 million more requests. So we'll keep you posted on those. We should know those, the results of those probably February.
Since we missed April, with everything moving so fast, I think I can speak for the rest of the committee if you need an interim meeting from us, because so much is happening. I don't think you'll have a hard time getting us out. So thanks so much for all your hard work.
Well, and now we have Michelle Bedard, who's our meeting expert, and can make sure that we flawlessly get our cameras on and our audio up and running, and maybe even some video sound in the future. I don't know how to do that either, so we'll figure it out. But thank you community members for all your hard work and for hanging in there with us and celebrating us with some good outcomes, even though it's not been through good circumstances. So
we're all hanging in there. Thank you all, and good night.
We adjourn the meeting.
Oh yes. I did. I just did.